ego sensitivity, training, balancing healthy self-esteem with the ability to receive criticism without collapse. Part 1. The Foundation. Understanding the Ego and its Discontents. Introduction. The Paradox of the Modern Ego. The two stories that changed everything. Let me begin with two stories. I want you to hold them in your mind as we journey through this book together, because they represent the poles between which most of us oscillate, often without even realizing it. Story 1. The Executive Who Couldn't Hear a Word. Margaret was 47 years old when she was promoted to Chief Operating Officer of a regional healthcare network. She had earned it. 23 years of grinding, of late nights, of sacrificing relationships for spreadsheets, of being the smartest person in every room she entered. Her performance reviews were legendary. Her subordinates feared her. Her superiors admired her. Her ego was a monument carved from granite, inscribed with every achievement, every award, every promotion. Then came the 360-degree feedback review. It was a standard corporate ritual, something she had administered to others dozens of times, but this time she was on the receiving end. The report was 12 pages long. The first 3 pages praised her operational brilliance, her strategic vision, her ability to turn around failing departments. She read those pages with a satisfied smile. Then she turned to page 4. Margaret's leadership style is perceived as intimidating and dismissive. Many team members report feeling unheard and undervalued. While her results are exceptional, her interpersonal approach creates a culture of fear rather than collaboration. Several senior directors have requested transfers rather than continue reporting to her. Margaret read those words. Then she read them again. Her vision blurred. Her chest tightened. Her hands began to tremble. She did something she had never done in her professional life. She closed her laptop, walked into the executive bathroom, and vomited into the toilet. That was the moment her monument began to crumble. Not because the feedback was devastating, though it was, but because she had absolutely no framework for receiving it. Her entire identity had been built on being the one who gets results. The feedback suggested she was also the one who destroys people along the way. In her mind, these two things could not coexist. If she was hurting people, she couldn't be the brilliant leader she believed herself to be. And if she wasn't that leader, who was she? Margaret spent the next 6 months in a state of quiet paralysis. She didn't change her behavior. She didn't address the feedback with her team. Instead, she retreated into her office, communicating almost entirely through email. She stopped attending team meetings. She stopped making eye contact in the hallway. She was still technically the COO, but she had become a ghost in her own organization. Within a year, she was quietly asked to resign. She accepted a generous severance package and moved to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, where she started a boutique consulting firm. She told everyone she had wanted a change of pace. In truth, she had been psychologically shattered by 4 paragraphs in a corporate document. Margaret is a classic example of what I call the ego fortress. Her sense of self was built to keep criticism out, and when criticism breached the walls, the entire structure collapsed. She couldn't metabolize the feedback because she had never learned how. Story 2. The Artist Who Grew Through Pain. Now, let me tell you about David. David is a classically trained violinist. At 28, he won a prestigious competition that earned him a solo performance with a major symphony orchestra. It was his dream come true. The concert was recorded, broadcast on public radio, and reviewed by the city's leading music critic. The review came out the next morning. David's technical facility is undeniable, the critic wrote. However, his interpretation of the Brahms concerto felt mechanical, devoid of the emotional depth that this piece demands. He played every note correctly, but he failed to play the music. It was a performance of precision, without passion. David read the review in his tiny apartment. His girlfriend watched his face as he read it. She expected him to crumple. She expected tears, or rage, or that hollow silence that comes when a dream turns into a nightmare. Instead, David nodded slowly. He poured himself a cup of coffee, sat down at his desk, and read the review 3 more times. Then he called his old conservatory teacher. "You know," he said to his teacher, "I think the critic might be right. I've been so focused on playing perfectly that I've forgotten why I wanted to play at all. Can I come back for some lessons?" His teacher was stunned. "David, you're the star pupil now. You should be teaching me." "I'm not teaching anyone anything," David replied. "I'm asking you to help me find the soul in my playing. The notes are there. The feeling isn't." David went back to the practice room. He spent months, not practicing technique, but feeling. He listened to recordings of his old heroes. He studied the poetry that inspired Brahms. He even took a leave of absence from performing to work as a music therapist in a children's hospital, playing for sick kids who didn't care about perfection, who only cared about connection. When David returned to the concert hall 2 years later, he was a different musician. The critic who had panned him came to the performance, expecting to confirm his earlier judgment. Instead, he wrote a follow-up review titled "The Redemption of a Musician." David has found what he was missing. His playing now breathes. His interpretation of Brahms is no longer a mechanical reproduction, but a genuine conversation with the composer. He has become the artist we knew he could be, not because he perfected his technique, but because he finally understood what his technique was for. David didn't just survive the criticism, he was transformed by it. Not because he was unusually stoic or thick-skinned. In fact, he cried in private for several days after reading that first review. He felt every bit of the sting, but he had a framework for receiving it. He understood the difference between who he was and what he had done. He understood that the criticism was about his performance, not his existence. David had what I call ego sensitivity. He was sensitive enough to feel the pain of criticism, but resilient enough to use it as fuel for growth. The Great Confusion. These 2 stories reveal something essential about the human condition. We have been profoundly confused about the ego for centuries. On one hand, we have been told that the ego is the enemy. Eastern philosophies, certain strains of psychology, and even some self-help movements have urged us to kill the ego, to transcend it, to see it as an illusion that separates us from our true nature. There is truth in this perspective. The ego can indeed be a tyrant, a storyteller that weaves narratives of superiority or inferiority that keep us trapped in suffering. On the other hand, we live in a culture that worships the ego. Social media is an amplifier of narcissism. Our careers demand that we project confidence, certainty, and competence. We are told to believe in ourselves, manifest our destiny, and never apologize for who we are. The ego in this telling is the engine of success. These 2 perspectives create a paradox that most of us never resolve. We are told to have healthy self-esteem, but then told not to be too confident. We are told to be humble, but then told not to be too self-deprecating. We are told to be open to feedback, but then told to ignore the haters. The result is that we lurch between ego inflation and ego deflation like a pendulum without a center. One day we feel invincible, the next day we feel worthless. We are either defending ourselves against criticism, fortress, or collapsing under its weight, sandcastle. We rarely find the middle ground, the place where we can hold our worth lightly and our mistakes honestly. The Third Way. Ego sensitivity training. This book is about that middle ground. Ego sensitivity training is not about killing the ego or inflating it. It is about training the ego, shaping it, strengthening it, and making it responsive rather than reactive. It is about building an ego that is strong enough to withstand the slings and arrows of life, but flexible enough to bend in the wind of criticism. Think of it this way. Your ego is like the frame of a ship. If the frame is too rigid, the first storm will snap it in half. If the frame is too weak, it will collapse under the weight of the cargo. The ideal frame is resilient, strong but flexible, firm but forgiving. It holds its shape under stress, but it can also adjust to the waves. This is what we are building together in this book. What this book will do over the course of these pages, we will cover. Part 1. The Foundation. We will explore what the ego actually is, not as a mystical concept, but as a psychological structure that can be understood and changed. We will diagnose your current ego profile using the 4 archetypes framework. We will conduct a vulnerability audit to map exactly where you are most reactive. We will examine the neuroscience of defensiveness and understand why criticism feels so physically painful. Part 2. The Training. This is the practical core of the book. You will learn the 5 essential skills of ego sensitivity. The pause, the ability to stop the fight or flight response before it hijacks you. The filter, the ability to distinguish between useful feedback and noise. The reframe, the ability to reinterpret criticism as data rather than judgment. The apology algorithm, the ability to take accountability without shame. The integration, the ability to incorporate feedback without losing your sense of self. You will also receive a 30-day training protocol with daily exercises designed to build your ego sensitivity like a muscle. Part 3. The Application. We will apply these skills to the most challenging arenas of modern life. The workplace, performance reviews, difficult bosses, peer feedback, intimate relationships, hearing your partner's complaints as bids for connection, social media and public life, navigating trolls, negative reviews, and public failures, creative work using rejection as fuel, leadership, creating a culture where criticism is safe. Part 4. The Integration. We will look at the long-term maintenance of ego sensitivity. How do you keep this skill sharp over a lifetime? How do you teach it to others, your children, your employees, your friends? The Promise. By the end of this book, you will not become immune to criticism. If you take nothing else from these pages, take this. Immunity is not the goal. A person who feels nothing when criticized is not enlightened. They are either numbed or narcissistic. Instead, you will become someone who notices the defensive response rising in your body, the hot face, the racing heart, the urge to argue, but does not act on it impulsively. Assesses the criticism objectively. Is this true? Is this useful? Is this meant to help or harm? Decides what to do with it, take it in, discard it, or hold it for later reflection. Responds from a place of clarity rather than reaction. You will become someone who can apologize without feeling worthless. You will become someone who can stand your ground without being arrogant. You will become someone who can be wrong without falling apart. This is the art of the unshakable self. Not a self that is rigid and immovable, but a self that is deeply rooted, like a great redwood in a storm. The redwood bends, it sways, it drops a few branches, but it does not uproot. How to use this book. This is not a book to be read passively. It is a training manual. Each chapter includes exercises, reflections, and experiments designed to build your ego sensitivity in real time. I encourage you to keep a journal dedicated to this work. Set aside time each week to reflect on what you're learning. Share the concepts with trusted friends or colleagues. Revisit chapters as needed, especially the training protocols. You may find some exercises challenging. That's the point. Growth happens at the edge of discomfort. When you feel that resistance rising, you are exactly where you need to be. Let's begin. Part 1: The Foundation. Chapter 1: The Ego as a Muscle, Not a Castle. The tyranny of the castle metaphor. To understand ego sensitivity training, we must first dismantle the flawed metaphor that governs most people's relationship with their ego. The dominant metaphor, one that has been reinforced by culture, psychology, and even our own defensive instincts, is that the ego is a castle. You are the king or queen inside the walls. The moat is your defensiveness. The drawbridge is your social filter. Your job is to keep the barbarians, critics, rivals, naysayers, enemies on the other side. When you operate with a castle mentality, the world is divided into two categories: those who support the crown, allies, admirers, yes-men, and those who threaten it, critics, competitors, anyone with a negative opinion. Every piece of feedback becomes a siege weapon. Every failure is a breach in the wall. Every criticism is an attack on your sovereignty. The castle mentality creates a life of constant vigilance. You are always scanning the horizon for threats. You spend so much energy maintaining the walls, patrolling the battlements, and repelling invaders that you have little time left for the actual business of ruling, of growing, of learning, of creating. Your ego becomes a fortress, and fortresses by their nature are prisons. You are not protecting yourself. You are trapping yourself. The neuroscience of the siege. Why does the castle metaphor feel so natural? Why does our ego react so violently to criticism? The answer lies in the evolution of the human nervous system. We are wired to perceive social threats as physical threats because, for most of our evolutionary history, social rejection literally meant death. If you were cast out of your tribe, you were as good as dead. You couldn't survive alone on the savannah. Your brain developed a system of alarms designed to keep you in the good graces of the group. This system is called the fight-or-flight response. You may have heard of it in the context of physical danger, a bear charging you, a car swerving toward you. But your brain activates this same response for social dangers: public speaking, rejection, criticism. Here's what happens when you receive a piece of negative feedback. The amygdala fires. This almond-shaped cluster of neurons in your limbic system is your brain's fear center. It processes incoming information and asks one question: is this a threat? Criticism is rapidly categorized as a social threat. The amygdala does not stop to consider whether the criticism is fair, useful, or even true. It just fires. The hypothalamus activates. This part of your brain sends a distress signal to your adrenal glands, which sit atop your kidneys. In milliseconds, your body is flooded with stress hormones, adrenaline, and cortisol. Your body transforms, your heart rate spikes, your blood pressure rises, your digestive system shuts down. You might feel nausea or a knot in your stomach. Your muscles tense, your pupils dilate. Blood is rerouted from your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and emotional regulation, to your arms and legs so you can fight or run. Your prefrontal cortex goes offline. This is the crucial part. When your body is in fight or flight mode, your higher cognitive functions literally shut down. You cannot think clearly. You cannot access your creativity, your empathy, or your long-term reasoning. You are operating on autopilot, driven by the most primitive parts of your brain. This is why you can't think straight when you're criticized. It's not a character flaw, it's biology. The part of your brain that would allow you to process feedback rationally has been temporarily disabled. This is what happened to Margaret in her office. When she read that feedback, her amygdala perceived a life-or-death threat. She couldn't process the feedback rationally. She could only fight, argue, deflect, or flee, withdraw, resign. She chose to flee all the way to the Pacific Northwest. The metaphor shift, the gymnasium. Now, let me offer a different metaphor, one that leads to growth rather than paralysis. Imagine your ego as a muscle, or more accurately, a whole set of muscles. Muscles are fascinating structures. They are composed of fibers that tear when subjected to stress. That's right. When you lift weights, you are creating microscopic tears in your muscle fibers. The healing process, the body's response to that stress, builds the muscle back stronger than before. This is called hypertrophy. But there's a catch. If you subject a muscle to too much stress too quickly, you don't get hypertrophy. You get a tear. A torn muscle is not stronger. It's damaged. It requires rest, rehabilitation, and a slower approach. Similarly, a muscle that is never subjected to stress becomes weak and atrophied. If you spend your life avoiding all physical challenge, you will eventually lose the ability to lift even moderate weights. The ego works the same way. A criticism is like a weight placed on your identity. When you receive feedback, you are essentially lifting the weight of judgment. If you are well trained, you can bear that weight, feel the burn of it, and grow stronger from the process. If you are untrained, the weight will crush you. If you avoid weights altogether, you will become psychologically fragile. Ego sensitivity training is your gym membership for the psyche. We are going to warm up with small doses of discomfort, build strength with progressive challenges, practice recovery when you feel bruised, cross-train by applying your skills to different contexts. The 3 doors of reception. Now that we've established the gym metaphor, let's look at the specific mechanisms of how criticism enters your psyche. I call this the 3 doors framework. Imagine that your identity is a house. On the front of this house, there are 3 doors. When criticism arrives, it will try to enter through one of them. Door 1, the door of identity. Location, the core of the house. Label on the door, this is who I am. What happens when criticism enters here? You internalize the criticism as a fundamental truth about your worth. You don't just hear, you made a mistake. You hear, you are a mistake. You don't just hear, your work needs improvement. You hear, you are a failure. The result, shame, collapse, depression, or defensive rage. Why we open this door? Because we have confused our behavior with our being. We were taught, by parents, by teachers, by culture, that when we did something wrong, we were bad. The punishment attached to our badness wasn't just about the behavior. It was about who we were. The instruction. This door must be locked at all times. No criticism is allowed to enter here. Ever. Door 2. The door of behavior. Location, the middle of the house. Label on the door, this is what I did. What happens when criticism enters here? You hear the feedback as information about a specific action, choice, or pattern. You are able to examine it objectively. You can ask, is this true? Is this useful? What can I learn from this? The result, growth, adaptation, learning, and accountability without shame. Why we close this door? Because we have never been taught to separate our actions from our identity. We assume that if we did something wrong, it must mean we are wrong. This door requires training to keep open. The instruction. This door must be kept wide open. This is the door through which all useful feedback should enter. Door 3. The door of context location. The periphery of the house. Label on the door, this is not about me. What happens when criticism enters here? You recognize that the feedback is not about you at all. It may be a projection of the critic's own insecurities, an expression of their personal preference, a misunderstanding based on missing information, a malicious attack designed to harm. The result, you discard the feedback without defensiveness. You don't internalize it, but you also don't fight it. You simply let it go. Why we can't find this door? Because we are trained to take everything personally. We assume that if someone says something to us, it must be about us. But often it's not. The instruction, this door must be available when needed. You should be able to glance at the feedback, say, "This is noise," and toss it out. The door practice. Let's practice this right now. Think of a recent criticism that stung. It could be from a boss, a partner, a parent, or even a stranger on the internet. Now, ask yourself, which door did I let this criticism enter through? If you felt shame, worthlessness, or deep depression, it went through the identity door. If you felt motivated to change, curious about the feedback, or grateful for the insight, it went through the behavior door. If you thought, "This person is completely off base and it has nothing to do with me," it went through the context door. Now ask yourself, which door should it have entered through? If the criticism was valid and useful, it should have gone through the behavior door. If the criticism was invalid or malicious, it should have gone through the context door. If the criticism was about something you cannot change, your height, your race, your age, it should also go through the context door, because it's not about your behavior. But never, I repeat, never let criticism through the identity door. That door is locked, bolted, and sealed shut. You are not your mistakes. You are not your flaws. You are not the feedback you receive. You are a person who behaves. Sometimes you behave well, sometimes you behave poorly, but your behavior is not your essence. The first micro-action, the labeling game. Before we move on, I want you to begin your training. For the next 24 hours, I want you to play the labeling game. Every time you receive any form of feedback, whether it's a pointed remark from a colleague, a critique from your spouse, a raised eyebrow from a friend, or even a negative comment on your social media post, you are going to silently label it. Here's the label. This is information about my behavior, not my existence. You don't have to agree with the criticism. You don't have to internalize it. You don't have to argue with it. You just have to label it. You are intercepting the feedback before it hits the identity door and redirecting it toward the behavior door. Say it to yourself, out loud or in your head. Say it 10 times if you have to. Say it while the person is still talking. This is information about my behavior, not my existence. This is your first rep in the ego gym. It's a lightweight, but it's essential. You are building the neural pathway that will eventually become automatic. Summary of Chapter 1. The castle metaphor traps us in a defensive posture that prevents growth. Criticism activates the fight or flight response, shutting down the higher brain functions needed for processing feedback. The gym metaphor offers a more useful framework. Criticism is a weight that can strengthen us if we learn to bear it. The 3 doors framework helps us redirect criticism away from our identity and toward our behavior. The first micro-action, labeling, builds the foundational skill of interception. In the next chapter, we'll diagnose your current ego profile. Are you a fortress, a sandcastle, a brick wall, or a river? The journey has begun. Chapter 2. The 4 ego archetypes. Know thyself, especially thy defenses. Know thyself was inscribed on the temple of Apollo at Delphi. It was the foundation of Greek philosophy and, by extension, Western thought. But knowing thyself is not a passive discovery. It is an active excavation. We are not simply discovering who we are uncovering layers of habit, defense, and reactivity that have been built up over a lifetime. Before you can train your ego, you need to know what shape it is currently in. This chapter provides a diagnostic framework, the 4 ego archetypes. These are not personality types. They are not fixed identities. They are patterns that you have developed in response to threat. Most of us have a dominant archetype, the one we default to under stress. But we can shift between archetypes depending on the context. You might be a river at work, but a sandcastle in your romantic relationships. You might be a fortress with strangers, but a brick wall with your parents. The goal is not to label yourself and stop. The goal is to recognize the pattern so you can interrupt it. Archetype 1. The Fortress Motto. I am right, you are wrong, and I will prove it. Core fear, mediocrity, inadequacy, being exposed as a fraud. Defensive strategy. Attack, deflect, rationalize, minimize. The fortress in action. The fortress appears arrogant, stubborn, and dismissive. They deflect blame with surgical precision. They are often high achievers because their ego demands external validation. Their self-worth is contingent on being better than others, smarter, more successful, more competent. When criticized, the fortress's immediate response is to lawyer up. They will explain why the critic is wrong, why the context is different, why they actually did the best job possible given the circumstances, and why the critic is biased, uninformed, or malicious. They may nod politely during the conversation, but inside they are forming a rebuttal. They are not listening. They are preparing their defense. When they finally speak, they will likely use phrases like, "Let me clarify why that's not accurate. You're taking that out of context. I don't think you understand the situation. I'm sorry you feel that way, but actually the data shows. Have you considered?" The fortress's defensiveness can be so smooth, so articulate, so reasonable that even the critic might start to doubt themselves. The fortress doesn't raise their voice or lose their temper. They simply refuse to accept any reality that challenges their self-perception. The hidden vulnerability. The fortress is secretly terrified of mediocrity. Their arrogance is a shield against a profound, well-hidden feeling of inadequacy. If they ever admitted they were wrong, they fear the entire facade would crumble. They are protecting a castle made of cards, and deep down, they know it. This is why the fortress often collapses catastrophically when criticism finally gets through. Because they have no capacity to absorb smaller doses of feedback, the one criticism that slips past their defenses hits them with the full force of years of accumulated denial. Margaret, the executive from the introduction, is a classic example. She had deflected feedback for her entire career. When a major criticism finally broke through, she didn't just feel stung, she felt annihilated. The fortress's blind spot. The fortress doesn't realize that their defensiveness makes them look less competent, not more. They believe they are projecting strength and confidence, but in reality, their refusal to accept feedback reveals insecurity. People who work for fortresses know that they cannot be corrected, so they stop trying. They stop bringing up problems. They stop sharing ideas. They stop caring. The fortress may win the argument, but they lose the team. Training prescription for the fortress. The maybe pivot. For the next 30 days, the fortress must adopt a radical new rule, forbidden to say but in response to criticism. When you receive feedback, you are allowed to say, "Thank you. I will consider that. I appreciate you sharing that." You are not allowed to defend yourself, explain why the critic is wrong, offer context that undermines the feedback. This is not about accepting bad feedback. This is about breaking the pattern of automatic defensiveness. You can always decide later, privately, that the feedback was wrong. But in the moment, you must practice the physical act of receiving without defending. The what if they're right exercise. Once a week, write down a piece of feedback you received. Then ask yourself, what if this criticism is completely true? If it's true, what does it say about my behavior? Not my identity, my behavior. What would I need to change? Your goal is to sit with the discomfort of imagining yourself as fallible. This is the cognitive version of holding a plank, uncomfortable but strengthening. Archetype 2, the Sandcastle motto, I knew I was a fraud, just tell me how to fix myself. Core fear, being exposed as inadequate, unworthy, or unlovable. Defensive strategy, collapse, agree, internalize, self-flagellate. The Sandcastle in action. The Sandcastle has low self-esteem, high perfectionism, and a hair trigger for shame. They absorb criticism like a sponge absorbs water. They do not defend themselves. They agree with the critic and internalize the judgment as absolute truth. When criticized, the Sandcastle says things like, "You're right. I'm so sorry. I knew I wasn't good enough. I'll try harder, I promise. I'm such a disappointment. I don't know why I even tried." They might apologize excessively, promising to do better without any plan for what better actually looks like. They might become withdrawn, anxious, or depressed. They don't fight the criticism, they marry it. They take full responsibility for everything, even things that aren't their fault. This behavior often elicits sympathy or reassurance from others. "Oh no, you're not that bad," people say. "You're being too hard on yourself." The Sandcastle gets temporary relief from this reassurance, but it doesn't address the underlying dynamic. They remain dependent on others to rebuild their ego, and they continue to collapse under the next criticism, the hidden vulnerability. The Sandcastle suffers from a cognitive distortion called personalization. This is the tendency to take responsibility for things that are not under your control, to assume that feedback is always about you and to interpret neutral events as critical. The Sandcastle also suffers from perfectionism. They believe that if they can just be perfect enough, they will finally be safe from criticism. But of course, perfection is impossible, so every criticism, even the mildest, most constructive feedback, is proof of their failure to achieve the impossible. The Sandcastle's core wound is often a deep sense of unworthiness. They may have grown up with conditional love, being valued only when they performed well. They learned that their worth was contingent on their achievement, so any criticism of their achievement feels like a withdrawal of love. The Sandcastle's blind spot. The Sandcastle doesn't realize that their collapse is a form of control. When they say, "I'm so terrible, I'll never get it right," they are effectively ending the conversation. The critic now has to comfort them, reassure them, or back off entirely. The criticism has been neutralized, not by defense, but by self-flagellation. This is a passive-aggressive way of avoiding the actual content of the feedback. Training prescription for the Sandcastle, the data distinction exercise. When you receive criticism, physically write it down, then draw a line down the middle of the page. On the left, write the facts of the feedback. What was said? What evidence is there for this? What specifically happened? On the right, write the stories your mind is telling you. What are you interpreting? What catastrophic meaning are you assigning to it? What does your inner critic say? Example, facts, stories. My boss said the report needed more data on the third quarter. I'm a failure who can't do basic research. I missed the deadline by 2 hours. I'm a total loser with no discipline. My partner said I seem distracted at dinner. They hate me and think I'm a bad person. The goal is to separate what actually happened from the meaning you assign to it. This creates space between the event and your reaction. The self-compassion break. When you feel the collapse coming, place your hand on your heart and say this to yourself: "This is hard. I feel ashamed slash afraid slash small. But I am not my mistake. I am a human being who sometimes fails. I deserve compassion, not condemnation. This is not about excusing your behavior. It's about preserving your sense of self so that you can address the behavior effectively. You cannot fix a problem if you've collapsed into shame. You need to be present, grounded, and capable of action. Archetype 3, the brick wall. Motto, I am who I am. Take it or leave it. Defensive strategy. Dismiss, ignore, categorize as irrelevant. The brick wall in action. The brick wall is superficially similar to the fortress, but the motivation is different. The fortress is defensive. The brick wall is resistant. The fortress cares deeply about being right. The brick wall simply doesn't care about your opinion at all. The brick wall has a rigid, fixed mindset about their own identity. They confuse stability with stagnation. They say things like, "That's just how I am. This is my style. I've been doing this for 20 years. If you don't like it, that's your problem. I'm too old to change. This is who I am, and I'm not apologizing for it." They are not necessarily defensive. They don't argue, they dismiss. They don't feel threatened. They feel bored. The criticism simply doesn't register as relevant to their self-concept. They have built such a thick wall around their identity that nothing can penetrate it, including potentially useful feedback. The hidden vulnerability. The brick wall is afraid of change. They have built their identity around being consistent, and any suggestion that they should change feels like a threat. They value authenticity in a way that actually prevents growth. They mistake habit for essence. Underneath the wall is often a deep fear of chaos. If they start questioning one part of their identity, they fear the whole thing will unravel. They believe that if they change, they will lose themselves entirely. So they hold on, white-knuckled, to the familiar. The brick wall may also be operating from a place of exhaustion. They have been criticized so much, or for so long, that they have simply given up. They have lowered their expectations of themselves and others, and they refuse to expend the energy to improve. In this sense, the brick wall is a kind of emotional depression, a flattening of affect designed to protect against the pain of ambition. The brick wall's blind spot. The brick wall doesn't realize that their resistance to change makes them obsolete. In a world that is constantly evolving, people who cannot adapt become irrelevant. They may not be disliked, but they are no longer taken seriously. They become ghosts in their own lives, present but not engaged, alive but not growing. Training prescription for the brick wall, the what-if experiment. Choose one criticism you have been dismissing. Ask yourself these questions. What if I tried it the critic's way, just as an experiment? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? How would I know if it worked? Then commit to trying the new approach for a limited time, say 1 week or one project or one conversation. At the end of the experiment, evaluate whether it made a positive difference. You are not committing to permanent change. You are committing to curiosity. Decouple identity from habit. When you say that's just how I am, ask yourself, is this actually who I am, or is this just what I've been doing? Who was I before I developed this habit? Is this habit serving me or limiting me? Remind yourself that changing your mind is not a betrayal of yourself. It is an evolution of yourself. You are not a stone statue. You are a living, breathing organism, and organisms adapt to survive. Archetype 4, the river motto. I have a strong core, but I flow around obstacles. Core belief, my worth is inherent and unchanging, even as my behavior changes. Defensive strategy, pause, assess, respond, adapt. The river in action. The river is the trained ego. This is not someone who is immune to criticism. They feel the sting. They feel the embarrassment. They may even feel a flash of anger, but they do not act on those feelings impulsively. The river has a high degree of self-compassion combined with a high degree of self-accountability. They can look at a mistake and say, "That was a failure. I failed, but I am not a failure." They take responsibility for their behavior without condemning their identity. When criticized, the river listens fully without interrupting or preparing a rebuttal. Asks clarifying questions. Can you give me a specific example? What would you prefer I do differently? Sits with the feedback before responding. They do not need to answer immediately. Evaluates the feedback objectively. Is this true? Is this useful? Does this align with my values? Responds appropriately. They may thank the critic, apologize if needed, commit to change, or respectfully disagree, but they do so from a place of clarity, not reactivity. The river is not afraid of being wrong because their self-worth is not contingent on being right. They know that their value as a person is inherent, not earned. This frees them to focus on their behavior without being consumed by shame or defensiveness. The river's strengths. The river's core strength is psychological flexibility. They can adapt to new information without losing their sense of self. This makes them better learners. They can absorb feedback. Better leaders. They can model vulnerability. Better partners. They can hear criticism without withdrawing or attacking. More resilient. They bounce back from failure. More authentic. They are not pretending to be perfect. The river also has a strong sense of boundaries. They know what is theirs to own and what belongs to others. They can say, "I'm sorry," without saying I'm worthless. They can say you're wrong without saying you're stupid. They can say I need to change without saying I'm broken. The river's shadow. Even the river has challenges. The river can sometimes be too accommodating, too quick to accept feedback that is not actually useful. They may struggle with people who use criticism as a weapon because their openness can be exploited. They may also struggle with the emotional labor of being constantly available for feedback. It can be exhausting to always be in a state of receptivity. The river's training is maintenance. They must continue to do their daily reps so they don't slide back into fortress or sandcastle territory under extreme stress. They must also learn to discern when feedback is not useful and to protect their energy from toxic critics. The ego archetype self-assessment. Now it's time for you to assess your own dominant archetype. Be honest with yourself. This is not about judgment. It's about diagnosis. Take out your journal and answer these questions. 1. Immediate reaction. When someone criticizes you, especially if it's unexpected, what is your first impulse? I feel the need to defend myself, explain myself, or prove the critic wrong. I feel a wave of shame and want to disappear. I agree with the critic internally. I feel nothing much. I shrug it off and move on. I feel a pang of discomfort, but I try to listen and understand. 2. Internal monologue. What do you say to yourself when you receive criticism? They don't understand. They're wrong. I need to set the record straight. They're right. I'm terrible. I knew this would happen. Whatever. That's just their opinion. It doesn't matter. Okay, let me think about this. Is there something I can learn? 3. Behavioral pattern. How do others perceive you in moments of feedback? As arrogant, defensive, or difficult to work with? As overly apologetic, fragile, or lacking in confidence? As stubborn, unchanging, or checked out? As open, thoughtful, and adaptable? 4. Core fear. What are you most afraid of when criticism comes? being exposed as a fraud or as less competent than I appear, being revealed as unworthy of love or belonging, having to change or adapt. I'm comfortable where I am. I'm not afraid of criticism. I'm afraid of not growing. 5. Aftermath. What happens to you after the criticism conversation is over? I replay the conversation in my head, thinking of all the things I should have said. I spiral into negative self-talk and self-criticism. I forget about it completely. It didn't register. I reflect on it and decide what, if anything, to do differently. Scoring your archetype mostly A's. You are a fortress. Your ego is overprotected. You need to practice receiving without defending. Mostly B's. You are a sandcastle. Your ego is underprotected. You need to practice separating your identity from your behavior. Mostly C's. You are a brick wall. Your ego is rigid. You need to practice flexibility and curiosity. Mostly D's. You are a river. Your ego is well trained. You need to practice maintenance and discernment. What if I'm a mix? Most people are a mix. You might be a fortress at work and a sandcastle at home. You might be a river with friends and a brick wall with your family. This is normal. Your task is to identify your dominant archetype overall. Your secondary archetype in specific contexts. For example, I am generally a river, but when my boss criticizes me, I become a fortress. I am a sandcastle with my partner, but a brick wall with my mother. I am a fortress in professional settings, but a river in personal relationships. The more specific you can be, the more targeted your training will be. A note on archetype fluidity. It's important to understand that these archetypes are not permanent labels. They are patterns, and patterns can be changed. You might be a fortress now, but with training, you can become a river. You might be a sandcastle now, but with practice, you can learn to hold your ground. The goal is not to eliminate the other archetypes entirely. There are times when being a fortress is useful, when you need to defend a boundary or protect yourself from a toxic critic. There are times when being a sandcastle is useful, when you need to be humble and receptive. There are times when being a brick wall is useful, when you need to hold your ground against constant criticism. The goal is to have choice. A trained ego can access any archetype as needed, but defaults to the river. An untrained ego is stuck in a single archetype, reacting automatically to every stimulus. The archetypes in daily life. Let's see how the archetypes play out in specific situations. At work, archetype behavior impact fortress, dismisses feedback, blames others, argues with superiors. Stagnation, loss of trust, high turnover. Sandcastle apologizes excessively, makes no changes, seeks constant reassurance. Burnout, low performance, resentment. Brick wall, ignores feedback, continues same patterns, disengages, obsolescence, marginalization. River listens, learns, adapts, maintains self-worth, growth, respect, influence. In intimate relationships, archetype behavior. Impact fortress, blames, partner, refuses to apologize, demands change, distance, resentment, eventual breakdown. Sandcastle absorbs all blame, loses self, tries to be perfect, codependency, loss of identity. Brick wall withdraws, refuses to engage, says, "That's just how I am." Emotional starvation, isolation. River listens, owns their part, maintains boundaries, seeks connection, intimacy, growth, partnership with friends. Archetype behavior, impact fortress. Argues, needs to be right, dismisses others' feelings. Superficial friendships, resentment. Sandcastle agrees with everything, suppresses opinions, seeks approval. Lack of authenticity, exhaustion. brick wall unavailable, unresponsive, uninterested, lost friendships, isolation, river empathetic, honest, open, capable of repair, deep, lasting friendships. Summary of Chapter 2. We all have a dominant ego archetype that we default to under stress. The fortress defends against criticism through attack and deflection. The sandcastle collapses under criticism through internalization and shame. The brick wall resists criticism through dismissal and rigidity. The river receives criticism through pause, assessment, and adaptation. Your archetype is not permanent. It can be trained. Self-awareness is the first step. Diagnosis precedes treatment. In the next chapter, we'll conduct a vulnerability audit to map exactly where you are most reactive. You'll identify your hot buttons, the specific domains where criticism cuts deepest, and begin to understand why they trigger such powerful responses. Chapter 3. The Vulnerability Audit. Mapping your trigger topography. If you want to train your ego, you need to know where your weak points are. Imagine a physical trainer asking you, where does it hurt? They need to know if you have a bad knee, a weak back, or tight hamstrings before they prescribe a workout. Similarly, we need to map your psychological vulnerabilities. Criticism is not a universal stressor. It is highly specific. You might be able to shrug off a critique of your cooking, but a critique of your parenting sends you into a shame spiral. You might be able to take a brutal performance review in stride, but a single negative comment on Instagram ruins your week. This is your trigger topography, the unique landscape of your emotional reactivity. The 5 domains of vulnerability. Criticism typically attacks one of 5 domains of our identity. Let's explore each one in depth. Domain 1. Competence. I am smart, capable, talented, and effective. The core question: am I good enough at what I do? How criticism hits here: you made a mistake. Your work is subpar. You don't know what you're talking about. There are gaps in your knowledge. You're not as skilled as you think. The underlying fear: being exposed as a fraud, being seen as incompetent, stupid, or useless. Why it hurts so much. In a culture that values productivity and achievement, competence is often equated with worth. If you're not good at what you do, the logic goes you have no value. This is especially painful for people whose identity is wrapped up in their profession. Signs: this is a hot button. You feel intense shame when you make a mistake at work. You dread performance reviews or evaluations. You overprepare for everything to avoid being caught off guard. You have trouble delegating because you don't trust others to do it right. You have imposter syndrome, the feeling that you'll be discovered as a fraud. The root wound. You were praised only for achievement as a child. You were compared unfavorably to siblings or peers. You were ridiculed for mistakes or failures. You learned that love was conditional on performance. Domain 2. Morality. I am a good, decent, ethical person. The core question: am I a good person? How criticism hits here. You were selfish. You hurt me. You don't care about anyone but yourself. You're dishonest. You're cruel. You let people down. The underlying fear: being seen as bad, evil, corrupt, or morally bankrupt. Why it hurts so much. Moral identity feels like the core of the soul. If you're not a good person, the logic goes, you have nothing left. This is why criticism of morality is often the most devastating. It attacks the very foundation of who you believe yourself to be. Signs: this is a hot button. You feel a visceral panic when someone says you've hurt them. You go to great lengths to be seen as nice or good. You have trouble saying no because you don't want to be seen as selfish. You catastrophize moral failures. I made one mistake, so I must be a bad person. You are highly sensitive to criticism of your character. The root wound. You were shamed as a child for normal needs or behaviors. You were told you were bad rather than that your behavior was bad. You grew up in a rigidly religious or moralistic household. You learned that love was conditional on being good. Domain 3, likability. I am wanted, valued, and loved. The core question. Do people like me? Am I lovable? How criticism hits here. You're annoying. You're too much. You're not enough. I don't enjoy spending time with you. You're boring. You're socially awkward. The underlying fear. Being rejected, excluded, or abandoned. Why it hurts so much. Humans are social creatures. Our survival has depended on belonging to a group for hundreds of thousands of years. Social rejection is processed in the brain similarly to physical pain. This is why social criticism can feel like a physical injury. Signs: this is a hot button. You experience social anxiety or fear of judgment. You seek constant reassurance that you're liked. You feel devastated when you're left out of an invitation. You monitor others' reactions carefully, hypervigilant for signs of rejection. You have trouble being alone because you worry you're unwanted. The root wound. You experienced rejection or exclusion as a child. You grew up with inconsistent or unreliable caregivers. You were bullied or ostracized by peers. You learned that love was scarce and had to be earned. Domain 4, control. I am safe, stable, and in charge of my life. The core question. Can I manage my life? Am I safe? How criticism hits here. You're disorganized. You can't handle this. You're a mess. You're out of control. You have no idea what you're doing. Your life is falling apart. The underlying fear. Chaos, unpredictability, vulnerability, powerlessness. Why it hurts so much. Control is a core psychological need. We need to feel that we have agency over our lives. When that sense of control is threatened, we feel unsafe, even physically endangered. Signs: this is a hot button. You feel panicked when plans change unexpectedly. You struggle to relax or go with the flow. You micromanage others to maintain control. You have difficulty delegating or trusting others. You feel like you're falling apart when things go wrong. The root wound. You grew up in chaotic or unpredictable environments. You experienced trauma that left you feeling powerless. You were told you were too sensitive or overreacting. You learned that the world is dangerous and you must protect yourself. Domain 5, appearance. I am attractive, healthy, and acceptable to look at. The core question. Do I look okay? Is my body acceptable? How criticism hits here. You look tired. You've gained weight. You're aging. You're not pretty enough. You're ugly. You don't take care of yourself. The underlying fear, being seen as undesirable, unattractive, or physically repulsive. Why it hurts so much. In a culture obsessed with appearance, the body has become a primary site of judgment. Additionally, appearance is often tied to a sense of self-control. If we let ourselves go, we must be lazy or weak. Signs: this is a hot button. You spend a lot of time and energy on your appearance. You obsess about your body, weight, or aging. You compare yourself unfavorably to others. You avoid mirrors or photos. You feel shame about your body. The root wound. You were criticized for your appearance as a child. You grew up in a family that was weight-obsessed or appearance-focused. You experienced body shaming from peers or partners. You learned that your value was tied to your appearance. The vulnerability audit exercise. Now, let's map your specific vulnerabilities. Part 1. Identify your hot buttons. Think back on the last 5 times you felt deeply hurt, defensive, or shamed in response to criticism. For each incident, answer these questions. What was the specific criticism? Which domain did it attack? Competence, morality, likability, control, appearance. Why does that domain matter so much to you? What is the core belief that is being threatened? Let's do an example. Incident criticism domain. Why it matters, core belief threatened. You're not a team player. Morality. I grew up being told that selfishness was the worst sin. I am selfish. This report is incomplete. Competence. My whole identity is wrapped up in being smart. I am incompetent. You seem distant lately. Likability. I'm afraid of being abandoned. I am unlovable. You're not managing the team well. Control. I need to feel in control, or I panic. I am powerless. You look tired. Appearance. I've always been self-conscious about my looks. I am ugly. Now it's your turn. Write down your own examples in your journal. Part 2. Trace the root wound. For each hot button, ask yourself, when did I first learn to feel this way? Who taught me that my value depended on this domain? What experiences reinforced this belief? Example, hot button root wound competence. My father told me I would never amount to anything when I got a C in math. Morality. I was sent to my room for hours whenever I talked back as a child. Likability. I was bullied in middle school and spent a year eating lunch alone. Control. My family moved 11 times before I turned 18. Appearance. My mother constantly criticized her own weight and projected it onto me. Part 3. The Ancient Wound Protocol. When you feel that hot flash of defensiveness, the racing heart, the urge to argue, the wave of shame, ask yourself this internal question. Is this about them? Or is this about my father/mother/school bully/ex? Is this a present tense problem or an old wound being reopened? If it is an old wound, you do not need to fix the present tense situation immediately. You need to comfort your inner child or inner teenager first. Say to yourself, I see you. I know you are scared. But that was then, and this is now. We are an adult now. We can handle this. Their opinion of me does not determine my worth. This is the beginning of the pause that we will develop in Part 2. But you cannot pause if you don't know what you are pausing for. The vulnerability audit gives you the roadmap. It tells you where the landmines are buried. When you know where the landmines are, you can walk through the field safely. The trigger journal. For the next 30 days, keep a trigger journal. Whenever you feel defensive, reactive, or collapsed in response to criticism, write down the trigger, what was said or done, the domain, which of the 5 domains was hit, the story, what did you tell yourself about it, the root, what old wound was activated, the response, how did you respond, how do you wish you had responded. Over time, patterns will emerge. You'll start to see that 80% of your reactivity comes from 20% of your triggers. Once you know your top triggers, you can focus your training on those specific domains. Summary of Chapter 3. Criticism is not a universal stressor. It hits specific vulnerabilities. There are 5 domains of vulnerability: competence, morality, likability, control, and appearance. Your trigger topography is the unique map of your emotional reactivity. Root wounds from childhood often amplify present tense criticism. The trigger journal helps you track and understand your patterns. Recognizing a trigger as an old wound is the first step to disarming it. Part 2. The training. The sensitivity protocol building your ego. Sensitivity, welcome to the gym. Part 1 was about diagnosis. You identified your archetype, mapped your vulnerabilities, and began to understand the architecture of your defensiveness. Now it's time to train. Part 2 is the practical core of the book. You will learn the 5 essential skills of ego sensitivity. The pause, the ability to stop the fight or flight response before it hijacks you. The filter, the ability to distinguish between useful feedback and noise. The reframe, the ability to reinterpret criticism as data rather than to judgment. The apology algorithm, the ability to take accountability without shame. The integration, the ability to incorporate feedback without losing your sense of self. At the end of Part 2, you will receive a 30-day training protocol with daily exercises designed to build your ego sensitivity like a muscle. Chapter 4. The Pause. Creating space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This is the foundational insight of ego sensitivity training. The problem is not that we are criticized. The problem is that we respond to criticism automatically without that vital space. We are like pinball machines, bouncing from stimulus to response without any consciousness in between. The pause is the skill of creating that space. It is the most important skill in this book. Without the pause, none of the other skills will work. You cannot filter, reframe, or integrate feedback if you are in the middle of a fight or flight response. The pause in action. Let's return to the example of Margaret, the COO who collapsed after her 360-degree feedback. Her response was automatic. She read the criticism, her amygdala fired, her prefrontal cortex went offline, and she fled, emotionally and then physically. There was no space between the stimulus, the feedback, and the response, the collapse. Now, imagine what could have happened if Margaret had had the skill of the pause. She reads the feedback. She feels the heat rising in her face. She feels the nausea. But instead of acting on those sensations, she says to herself, "I notice I am having a strong reaction. This feels like a threat, but I am not actually in danger. I can choose how to respond." She takes a slow breath. She allows her nervous system to settle. She gives herself permission to sit with the discomfort. She doesn't need to respond immediately. She can take time to process the feedback before deciding what to do. This is the pause. It is the act of noticing your reaction, naming it, and choosing not to act on it impulsively. The physiology of the pause. The pause is not just a psychological technique. It is a physiological intervention. You are interrupting the fight or flight response and activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system that calms the body. Here's what happens when you pause effectively. You notice the physical signs of reactivity: racing heart, clenched jaw, shallow breathing, nausea or knot in stomach, sweating, urge to fight, flee, or freeze. You signal safety to your nervous system. You take a slow, deep breath. Exhale longer than inhale. You relax your muscles, unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders. You ground yourself in the present moment. Feel your feet on the floor. Your prefrontal cortex comes back online. Blood returns to your brain. You can think clearly again. You have access to logic, empathy, and judgment. You choose your response. Rather than reacting, you respond. You have access to your full cognitive and emotional resources. The pause techniques. Here are 5 specific techniques for practicing the pause. Experiment with each one and find what works best for you. Technique 1. The 5-second breath. This is the simplest and most powerful technique. When you feel the reactive surge, stop everything and take one slow breath. Inhale through your nose for 5 seconds. Hold for 2 seconds. Exhale through your mouth for 7 seconds, longer than the inhale. The extended exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's like a reset button for your nervous system. Pro tip: you can do this while someone is still talking. They won't notice. You're just taking a slow breath. Technique 2. The anchor. Choose a physical anchor that signals pause to your brain. This could be touching your thumb to your index finger, pressing your feet into the floor, placing your hand over your heart, squeezing a specific object, a pen, a stress ball. When you feel the reactive surge, touch your anchor. The physical sensation interrupts the automatic response and brings you into the present moment. Pro tip: practice your anchor when you're not stressed. Touch it during calm moments. That way, when you need it under stress, the neural pathway is already there. Technique 3. The labeling interrupt. When you feel the reactivity rising, simply label it. I am having a defensive reaction. I am feeling criticized. I notice I want to fight right now. The act of labeling recruits the prefrontal cortex. You are moving from the emotional brain, amygdala, to the cognitive brain, prefrontal cortex. You are observing your reaction rather than being inside your reaction. Pro tip: use a neutral observational tone. I notice, not I am so angry. Technique 4. The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise. If you're really struggling, use the full grounding exercise. 5. Name 5 things you can see. 4. Name 4 things you can touch. 3. Name 3 things you can hear. 2. Name 2 things you can smell. 1. Name 1 thing you can taste. This forces your brain to shift out of the threat response and into present moment awareness. Technique 5. The thank you pivot. This is a behavioral pause. When someone criticizes you, instead of defending or collapsing, simply say, "Thank you for telling me. I want to give that some thought." This is not about accepting the criticism. It's about buying yourself time to process it. You are saying, "I hear you, but I am not responding right now." Pro tip: you can decide later what to do with the feedback. You don't need to decide in the moment. Practice the phrase until it feels natural. The pause in different contexts. Let's see how the pause applies in specific contexts. At work situation without pause. With pause, boss criticizes your project. Interrupt, defend, explain. Thank you for the feedback. Can we schedule time to discuss it? I want to give it proper thought. Peer offers unsolicited advice. Roll eyes, dismiss, feel insulted. I appreciate your input. I'll consider that. Client complains. Argue, explain why they're wrong. I hear you. Let me think about what you've said and get back to you. In relationship situation, without pause, with pause. Partner says you're not listening. Get defensive. That's not true. I always listen. Take a breath. I hear you. Can you tell me more about what you're experiencing? Friend says you hurt their feelings. Feel shamed. Oh my God, I'm terrible. I'm so sorry. Pause. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Can we talk about it? Child says you're unfair. Argue. That's not fair to say. I work so hard for you. Pause. I hear you're upset. Let's talk about it after I've had a moment. On social media situation without pause. With pause. Trolling comment on your post, argue in the comments, rage type a response. Close the app, walk away, come back in an hour. Negative review of your work, publicly defend yourself, attack the reviewer. Write a response in a document. Sleep on it. Edit before posting. Comparison to someone else. Feel deflated, compare endlessly, feel less than. Pause. This is not about me, this is about their journey. The pause practice. The pause is a skill. You don't develop it by reading about it, you develop it by practicing it. Here are daily exercises to build your pause muscle. Exercise 1. The daily pause. Set aside 5 minutes each day to practice the pause in a low-stakes context. This could be pausing before checking your email, pausing before scrolling social media, pausing before taking a bite of food, pausing before speaking in a meeting. The goal is to build the neural pathway of conscious interruption. You are practicing the skill of noticing and choosing in low-stakes moments so that it's available in high-stakes moments. Exercise 2. The reactivity log. Whenever you notice a defensive reaction, even a mild one, write down, what triggered it? What physical sensations did you notice? What was your impulse? Did you pause? What happened when you did? Exercise 3. The pause in conversation. In your next conversation, consciously practice the pause. Wait 2 full seconds after the other person finishes speaking before you respond. Notice the urge to interrupt. Don't act on it. If you feel reactive, take a slow breath before speaking. Common challenges with the pause. Challenge 1. I forget to pause. This is normal. You are breaking a deeply ingrained habit. It takes repetition and awareness. Keep practicing the daily pause. Eventually, it will become automatic. Challenge 2. I can't pause when I'm really triggered. That's okay. The pause is a muscle. Start with low-stakes triggers and work your way up. If you miss the pause, don't shame yourself. Just notice that you missed it and try again next time. Challenge 3. People think I'm being dismissive when I say, "Thank you for telling me." This can happen if you're not genuine. Make sure your tone is warm and open. You can also add, "I appreciate you sharing this with me. This is helpful. I need to process it. I'm glad you told me. Let me take some time to think." Challenge 4. I feel like I'm avoiding confrontation by not responding immediately. This is the opposite of avoiding. You are choosing a more thoughtful response. It takes courage to step out of the reactivity and into thoughtful response. You are not avoiding. You are pausing to respond more effectively. Summary of Chapter 4, The Pause, is the foundational skill of ego sensitivity. It creates space between stimulus and response, allowing you to choose your reaction. The pause interrupts the fight or flight response and activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Techniques include the 5-second breath, the anchor, the labeling interrupt, the grounding exercise, and the thank you pivot. The pause must be practiced deliberately in low-stakes moments to be available in high-stakes moments. Common challenges include forgetting, being too triggered, and feeling like you're avoiding. These are addressed through awareness and practice. Chapter 5, The Filter. Distinguishing data from danger. Now that you have the pause, the ability to stop reacting automatically, you need the next skill, the ability to evaluate the criticism you've received. Not all criticism is created equal. Some feedback is valuable, accurate, and useful. Some feedback is noise, projections, misunderstandings, or outright malice. The ability to distinguish between the two is what I call the filter. The filter is not about dismissing criticism or accepting it uncritically. It's about discerning which feedback to take in and which to let go. It's about being open without being naive. The filter framework. I've developed a four-part framework for filtering criticism. I call it the DATA framework. D. Data or story. Question to ask. Is this feedback based on specific observable facts, or is it based on interpretation, opinion, or emotion? Data-based feedback. Your report was submitted 2 hours late. You interrupted me 3 times in the meeting. The sales figures dropped 15% this quarter. Story-based feedback. You don't care about deadlines. You're disrespectful. You're a terrible leader. Data-based feedback is useful. It's specific, actionable, and verifiable. Story-based feedback is less useful. It's an interpretation, not a fact. How to respond. If the feedback is story-based, ask for data. Can you give me a specific example of what you mean? What did I do that made you feel that way? This helps you understand the underlying data and makes the feedback more useful. A. Accurate or inaccurate? Question to ask, is this feedback factually true? Accurate feedback. The report was late. It was indeed late. I raised my voice in the meeting. I did. Inaccurate feedback. The report was late. Actually, it was on time. I raised my voice. I was calm and measured. If the feedback is inaccurate, you can dismiss it. You don't need to accept criticism that is factually wrong. However, it's worth checking whether there's a misunderstanding. Sometimes the critic has incomplete information. In those cases, the feedback may be inaccurate, but still valuable. It points to a communication gap. How to respond. If the feedback is factually wrong, you can say, "Thank you for the feedback. I want to clarify something. The report was actually submitted on time. Is there a reason you thought it was late?" This corrects the record without being defensive. T. True or twisted? Question to ask. Is this feedback rooted in truth, but distorted or exaggerated? Twisted feedback. You are always late. You were late once. You never listen. You sometimes get distracted. You are terrible with people. You had a few awkward interactions. Twisted feedback is a distortion of reality. It's a grain of truth wrapped in a blanket of exaggeration. These are the most challenging type of feedback to filter because there is truth in them. But the truth is amplified into a character assassination. How to respond. Acknowledge the truth. You're right, I was late on Wednesday. I think that was the only time this month, but I understand why it was frustrating. Then gently correct the distortion. I'd like to think I'm generally reliable. Was there something else that frustrated you? You. Useful or useless? Question to ask. Even if this feedback is true, is it actually helpful? Useful feedback. You could improve your presentation skills by slowing down. Your emails could be more concise. Useless feedback. You should smile more. Assuming you're in a non-service job where that's irrelevant. Your hair is too short. Not relevant to your performance. You're too passionate. If you're in a creative field, that's not a problem. Sometimes feedback is true but irrelevant. You don't need to act on every piece of criticism. The question is whether it's useful for your goals and values. How to respond. You can simply ignore useless feedback. You don't need to argue with it. Just let it go. If it comes from someone whose opinion matters to you, you might say, "Thank you for your perspective. I'll keep that in mind." The filter in action. A case study. Let's see how the filter works in a real-world scenario. The situation. Sarah is a marketing manager. Her boss, David, calls her into his office and says, "Sarah, I'm concerned about your performance lately. You seem checked out. Your work quality has declined, and frankly, you're not the team player you used to be. I need to see more commitment." Sarah's old self would have collapsed. Oh no, he's right. I'm failing. I'm going to get fired. Defended. That's not fair. I've been working twice as hard since the budget cuts. You don't see how much I'm doing. But Sarah has been practicing ego sensitivity training. She uses the pause. She takes a slow breath. Then she runs the feedback through the filter. D. Data or story? Sarah asks herself, is this feedback based on specific observable facts, or is it based on interpretation? She notices that David's feedback is mostly story-based. You seem checked out. Interpretation. Your work quality has declined. Could be data, but vague. You're not the team player you used to be. Interpretation. I need to see more commitment. David's desire, not a fact. She realizes she needs more data. Sarah's response. David, thank you for sharing this with me. I want to understand better. Can you give me specific examples of what you're noticing, particularly around the work quality and team collaboration? A. Accurate or inaccurate? David provides specific examples. The Q3 report had several formatting errors. You missed the deadline for the budget proposal. At the team meeting yesterday, you didn't speak up when I asked for input. Sarah checks her memory. The Q3 report did have formatting errors. True. The budget proposal was submitted 1 hour late. True. She did stay silent in the meeting. True. Sarah also recalls. The formatting errors were a result of her assistant being out sick. Context. The budget proposal was late because she was waiting for approval from finance. Context. She stayed silent in the meeting because she was taking notes and listening. Context. The factual basis of the feedback is true, but the context is missing. David doesn't know the full story. T. True or twisted? Sarah asks, is this feedback rooted in truth but distorted? She realizes, you seem checked out is a distortion of the fact that she's been quieter in meetings. Your work quality has declined is a distortion of the fact that there were some specific errors. You're not the team player you used to be is a distortion of the fact that she's been more independent lately. The truth is, Sarah has had a few performance hiccups, but the story David is telling himself, that she doesn't care anymore, is a distortion. It's an interpretation based on incomplete information. You, useful or useless? Sarah asks, is this feedback useful? The feedback is definitely useful because she wants to succeed at her job. David is her boss and his opinion matters. The specific examples are actionable. She can fix formatting errors, improve deadlines, speak up more in meetings. However, the distortion that she's checked out is not useful. It's a judgment that doesn't help her improve. She needs to address the distortion so David can see the situation accurately. Sarah's filtered response. David, thank you for the specific examples. I appreciate you being direct with me. I agree that the formatting errors in the Q3 report were a problem. My assistant was out sick, but ultimately I'm responsible for the final product. The budget proposal was late because I was waiting on finance, but I should have communicated that to you earlier. And I hear you that I was quiet in the meeting. I was taking notes and listening, but I can see how that might have looked like disengagement. I want to be clear. I am fully committed to this role and to the team. I take this feedback seriously. I'll work on the formatting issues, communicate proactively about deadlines, and make sure I'm more visibly engaged in meetings. Can we check in next week to see how I'm doing? The result. David feels heard. Sarah has taken accountability for the specific issues. She has also gently corrected the distortion about her commitment without being defensive. She has proposed a follow-up, showing she's serious about improvement. Sarah has filtered the feedback effectively. She took in what was useful, discarded the distortion, and responded with clarity and strength. The filter exercise. Let's practice the filter right now. Think of a piece of criticism you've received recently. Write it down. Then run it through the DATA framework. Question answer. D. Data or story. Is this based on specific facts or is it an interpretation? A. Accurate or inaccurate. Is this factually true? Is there context missing? T. True or twisted. Is there a grain of truth that's been exaggerated? U. Useful or useless. Even if true, is this feedback actually helpful? Now write down what you would say in response. A filtered response that acknowledges the truth, corrects the distortions, takes accountability for what's yours, lets go of what's not useful. Common filtering mistakes. Mistake 1. Overfiltering, the sandcastle trap. The sandcastle filters nothing. They accept all criticism as true, no matter how distorted or useless. They collapse under the weight of every negative comment. Solution: use the filter rigorously. Not all feedback is created equal. You don't have to accept everything. Mistake 2. Underfiltering, the fortress trap. The fortress filters everything out. They find reasons to dismiss all feedback, even useful criticism. They learn nothing and grow resentful. Solution: ask yourself, what if this feedback is true? What if I'm wrong? Sit with the discomfort of being fallible. Mistake 3. Filtering too fast. You can't filter effectively if you're in a defensive state. You need to pause first. If you try to filter while you're reactive, you'll either overfilter, dismiss everything, or underfilter, accept everything. Solution: pause. Let your nervous system settle. Then filter. Mistake 4. Forgetting context. Sometimes feedback is accurate, but lacks context. The critic doesn't know the full story, and if you forget the context, you might accept feedback that's technically true, but not really your fault. Solution: when you hear feedback, ask yourself, what context is missing here? What does the critic not know? This helps you separate your responsibility from your fault. Responsibility versus fault. This is a crucial distinction. You are responsible for your role in things, but you are not necessarily at fault. Example: a project fails. You were the project manager. There were resource constraints, team conflicts, and unexpected delays. The project fails. Fault: it's not your fault that resources were constrained or that the team had conflicts. You didn't cause those things. Responsibility: you are responsible for how you managed the situation. You could have communicated better, escalated issues sooner, or advocated for more resources. When you receive criticism, ask yourself, what is my responsibility here? What was within my control? What was outside my control? You take ownership of what's within your control. You let go of what's not. This is the mature, differentiated response. Summary of Chapter 5. The filter is the skill of distinguishing between useful feedback and noise. The DATA framework helps you evaluate criticism. D. Is it data or story? A. Is it accurate or inaccurate? T. Is it true or twisted? U. Is it useful or useless? Not all feedback is created equal. Some is valuable, some is noise. The sandcastle filters nothing. The fortress filters everything. The river filters wisely. Remember the distinction between responsibility, what you can control, and fault, what you caused. Chapter 6. The Reframe. Reinterpreting criticism as data, not judgment. You've paused. You've filtered. Now you need the third skill, the ability to reframe the criticism, to reinterpret it in a way that allows you to learn without being destroyed. The reframe is the cognitive act of changing the meaning you assign to feedback. It's the skill of taking a painful message and translating it into a useful lesson. the power of reframing. Consider the difference between these two interpretations of the same criticism. Interpretations of your presentation was confusing. Impact, I am a terrible communicator. Identity, door. Shame, collapse, paralysis. I need to practice my presentation skills. Behavior, door. Motivation, action, growth. The same feedback, two completely different interpretations. One destroys you, the other builds you. Reframing is not about denying reality or positive thinking in the toxic sense. It's about accurately interpreting reality in a way that empowers you to act. The reframing framework. Here are 5 specific reframes you can apply to criticism. Reframe 1. From I am to I did. The distortion. You hear feedback as a statement about your identity. You made a mistake. I am a mistake. Your work was sloppy. I am sloppy. You were inconsiderate. I am inconsiderate. The reframe. Translate it into a statement about your behavior. I made a mistake. I made a mistake. Mistakes are fixable. My work was sloppy. My work was sloppy. I can improve it. I acted inconsiderately. I acted inconsiderately. I can make amends. The exercise. When you receive criticism, write it down. Then write down the I am version you're telling yourself. Then rewrite it as I did. Criticism, I am. I did. You're not leading the team well. I am a bad leader. I did not lead effectively in this situation. I can learn to lead better. You're selfish. I am a selfish person. I acted selfishly. I can choose to act differently. Your art is derivative. I am a derivative artist. My current work feels derivative. I can push myself to be more original. Reframe 2. From always to sometimes, the distortion. You hear feedback as a universal, permanent judgment. You always interrupt. You never listen. You're always late. You never care about my feelings. The reframe. Recognize the cognitive distortion of overgeneralization. No one always or never does anything. I interrupted sometimes. I didn't listen well in that conversation. I was late once. I didn't show care in that moment. The exercise. When you hear always or never, mentally rewrite it as sometimes or, in this case, criticism over generalization, reality. You're always late, always late. I was late today. I'm generally punctual. You never listen. Never listens. I didn't listen well during that conversation. I can do better. You're always so negative. Always negative. I'm expressing a lot of concerns right now. Reframe 3. From they're right to they have a perspective. The distortion. You assume that the critic is objectively correct and you are objectively wrong. The reframe. Recognize that the critic has a perspective. They are seeing reality from their position, with their history, their biases, and their needs. Their perspective may be valid, but it is not the only valid perspective. The exercise. When you hear criticism, ask yourself, what is their perspective? What do they see that I don't? What might they be right about? What might they be missing? Example, they say I'm not helpful. Their perspective, they needed support and felt I wasn't there for them. What they're right about, I was distracted and didn't offer help. What they're missing, I had my own urgent deadlines to meet. Reframe 4. From threat to information, the distortion. You hear criticism as an attack on your safety or survival. The reframe. Remind yourself that you are not in physical danger. This is information. Painful information, but still just information. You can use it or discard it. It cannot hurt you unless you let it. The exercise. When you feel the threat response, say to yourself, this is not a threat, this is information. I am safe. I am not in danger. I can take this in or leave it. I have a choice. Reframe 5, from perfection to learning. The distortion. You believe you should be perfect, and criticism is proof that you're not. The reframe. Adopt a growth mindset. Criticism is not proof of failure, it's feedback for learning. The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to get better. The exercise. When you receive criticism, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What would I do differently next time? What skill do I need to develop? Example feedback. Your presentation was confusing. Learning. I need to practice my presentation skills. I could use clearer slides, slower pacing, and more pauses. Action. I will take a presentation skills course and practice with a friend. The reframe in practice. Let's see how the reframe works in a real-world scenario. The situation. James, a software engineer, gets a code review. His teammate writes, "This code is messy. It's hard to follow. You're not following our team's best practices." James's old self would have collapsed. Sandcastle. I'm such a terrible coder. I'm going to get fired. I should quit. Defended. Fortress. My code is fine. This reviewer is just on a power trip. They don't know what they're talking about. But James has been training. He uses the pause. He takes a breath. He runs the feedback through the filter. Then he reframes. Step 1. Identity to behavior. I am a terrible coder becomes, my code was not up to standard in this review. Step 2. Always to sometimes, I'm always writing messy code becomes, this one piece of code was messy. Step 3. Threat to information. This is a threat to my career becomes, this is information about how to improve my coding. Step 4. Their perspective. They're right and I'm wrong becomes, they have a perspective. They value clarity and following best practices. What are they seeing that I'm not? Step 5. Perfection to learning. I should be perfect becomes, what can I learn from this? What skill do I need to develop? James's reframed response. Thank you for the code review. I can see why the code might be hard to follow. I was under a tight deadline and prioritized speed over clarity. I also realize I'm not fully up to speed on the team's latest best practices. Can you point me to the style guide and give me an example of how you'd like to see this refactored? I want to make sure I'm aligned with the team's standards. James has taken accountability. He has learned from the feedback. He has not defended or collapsed. He has reframed the criticism as an opportunity to learn. The reframe exercise. Part 1. Identify your distortion. Think of a recent criticism that stung. Write down the distortion you're telling yourself. Distortion example. Identity. I am a terrible communicator. Always / never. I always mess everything up. They're right. They're completely right about me. Threat. This is the end of my career. Perfection. I should have been perfect. Part 2. Reframe now. Write a new version of each statement. Distortion. Reframe. I am a terrible communicator. I communicated poorly in this instance. I can learn to communicate better. I always mess everything up. I made a mistake in this situation. That's different from messing everything up. They're completely right about me. They have a perspective. There may be some truth to it, but it's not the whole story. This is the end of my career. This is one piece of feedback. It's an opportunity to learn. I should have been perfect. Perfection is impossible. This is a chance to improve. Summary of Chapter 6. The reframe is the skill of reinterpreting criticism in a way that empowers you to learn and grow. 5 key reframes. Identity to behavior. I am a bad person. I did a bad thing. Always too. Sometimes. You always interrupt. I interrupted sometimes. Perspective, not truth. They're right. They have a perspective. Threat to information. I'm being attacked. I'm receiving information. Perfection to learning. I should be perfect. I can learn from this. The reframe requires conscious effort, especially when criticism is painful. With practice, reframing becomes more automatic. Chapter 7. The Apology Algorithm. Taking accountability without shame. One of the most powerful ways to receive criticism is to apologize when you're wrong. But for many people, apologizing is deeply uncomfortable, even terrifying. The Sandcastle apologizes too much. They over-apologize for everything, even things that aren't their fault. They apologize with such intensity that they emotionally exhaust both themselves and the recipient. The fortress apologizes too little. They resist apologizing because they see it as a sign of weakness. They will offer a non-apology apology. I'm sorry you feel that way. Or deflect blame. If I did anything wrong, it's because you pushed me. The brick wall doesn't apologize at all. They see no need. The river apologizes appropriately. They apologize when they're wrong. They do it genuinely. And they do it without losing their sense of self. This chapter presents a framework for apologizing effectively, taking accountability without collapsing into shame. I call it the apology algorithm. The anatomy of an effective apology. An effective apology has 4 components. I call them the 4 R's: recognition, acknowledge the harm or mistake; responsibility, own your role without blaming others; remorse, express genuine regret, not just obligation; repair, commit to making it right or changing your behavior. Let's explore each one. 1. Recognition: what it is. Clearly stating what you did wrong. What it's not. Vague statements or deflections. Examples: I acknowledge that I missed the deadline. I recognize that I interrupted you during the meeting. I see that I hurt your feelings with my comment. Why it matters. Recognition shows that you understand what you're apologizing for. It's the foundation of the apology. Without it, the apology is empty. Common mistakes. Being vague. I'm sorry about what happened. What happened? Deflecting. I'm sorry if you were offended. Not if you offended them. Minimizing. I'm sorry you were upset about the tiny little comment I made. 2. Responsibility. What it is. Owning your role without excuses. What it's not. Blaming others, making excuses, or deflecting. Examples: I take full responsibility for missing the deadline. I was wrong to interrupt you. I shouldn't have said that. It was unfair. Why it matters. Responsibility shows that you're not trying to dodge blame. It builds trust. It shows maturity. Common mistakes. Blaming others. I missed the deadline because you didn't give me the data on time. Excusing. I was really stressed out and I just couldn't focus. Deflecting. You know, I've been going through a lot lately. 3. Remorse: what it is. Expressing genuine regret. What it's not. Performative emotion or self-flagellation. Examples: I feel terrible that I let you down. I genuinely regret hurting your feelings. I know this was frustrating for you and I'm sorry. Why it matters. Remorse shows that you care. It's the emotional component of the apology. Without it, the apology feels robotic. Common mistakes. Overdoing it. I'm the worst person in the world. I don't deserve to live. Being cold. I apologize for any inconvenience. Too formal, no emotion. Making it about you. I feel so guilty I can't sleep. 4. Repair what it is, offering to make it right. What it's not, empty promises or vague statements. Examples. Let me talk to the client and see if we can get the deadline extended. In the future, I'll make sure to wait until you're finished speaking. I want to hear more about how you're feeling. Can we talk about it? Why it matters. Repair shows that you're committed to change. It provides closure and a path forward. Common mistakes. Vague promises. I'll do better next time. How? No plan. I'm sorry, that's all I can do. Over-offering. I'll do anything to make it up to you. Then not following through. The apology algorithm in action. The situation, Maria, a project manager, missed a critical deadline. Her client is upset. Her boss is upset. She needs to apologize. Maria's apology before training. I'm so sorry. I know I let everyone down. I've been so overwhelmed lately and I just couldn't get everything done. I feel terrible. I'm really trying my best. I promise I'll do better. Analysis, recognition, vague. What specifically is she apologizing for? Responsibility, weak. She's making excuses, overwhelmed. Remorse, genuine but unspecific. Repair, vague promise, I'll do better. Maria's apology, after training. I want to apologize for missing the deadline on the Johnson project. I take full responsibility for the delay. I know this has caused frustration for the client and put pressure on the team. I'm genuinely sorry for that. Here's my plan for repair. I've already spoken to the client and rescheduled the deliverable for Thursday. I've also asked a teammate to review my timeline to make sure I'm not overcommitting. Going forward, I'll communicate proactively if I see any deadline risks. I understand if you need more from me to rebuild trust, and I'm open to that conversation. Analysis, recognition, clear and specific. Johnson project missed deadline. Responsibility, takes ownership, no excuses. Remorse, genuine and specific, acknowledging the impact. Repair, concrete and actionable, rescheduled, asked for review, proactive communication. The apology algorithm template. When you need to apologize, use this template. Step 1. Recognition. I want to apologize for specific action/behavior. Step 2. Responsibility. I take full responsibility for my role in the situation. Step 3. Remorse. I know this affected or caused frustration to hurt you, and I'm genuinely sorry for that. Step 4. Repair. Here's what I'll do to make it right. Specific actions. I'm open to any additional suggestions you have. When not to apologize. The apology algorithm is for when you are genuinely wrong. But there are times when you should not apologize. 1. When you didn't do anything wrong. If you are being blamed unfairly, don't apologize. You can express understanding. I hear you're frustrated, without taking responsibility. But I don't think I did anything wrong. 2. When the apology would be manipulative. Some people apologize to end the conversation, not to make things right. This is called a non-apology apology. It's manipulative and doesn't help. 3. When apologizing would violate your integrity. If you're being asked to apologize for something that goes against your values, don't do it. You can say, I understand you see it differently, but I can't apologize for that. 4. When the other person is projecting. If someone is criticizing you for something that is actually about them, their insecurity, their history, their own behavior, you don't need to apologize. You can offer empathy without taking responsibility. The difference between guilt and shame. This is a crucial distinction for the apology algorithm. Guilt, I did a bad thing. Behavior, shame, I am a bad person. Identity, guilt is healthy. It motivates repair and change. Shame is destructive. It collapses the self and prevents growth. When you apologize, you are expressing guilt. You are saying, I did something wrong and I want to make it right. You are not saying, I am wrong as a person. If you feel shame when apologizing, you have opened the identity door. You are apologizing from a place of worthlessness, not accountability. This is the sandcastle's trap. Practice. When you apologize, say to yourself, I am a good person who made a mistake. My worth is not on the line. Common apology mistakes and how to fix them. Mistake example. Fix the if apology. I'm sorry if you were offended. I'm sorry for what I said. It was insensitive. The but apology. I'm sorry, but I was just trying to help. I'm sorry, my intentions don't change the impact. The you apology. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry for my role in this. The vague apology. I'm sorry about everything. I'm sorry for missing the deadline. The dramatic apology. I'm the worst person ever. I'm sorry for my mistake. The defensive apology. I'm sorry, but you provoked me. I'm sorry for my reaction. I should have handled it differently. The empty apology. I'm sorry, no follow through. I'm sorry, here's what I'll do to make it right. The apology exercise. Part 1. Practice the template. Think of a recent situation where you should have apologized but didn't. Write an apology using the 4 R's template. Step, your response. Recognition. I want to apologize for. Responsibility. I take full responsibility for. Remorse. I know this affected you because. Repair. Here's what I'll do to make it right. Part 2. Distinguish guilt from shame. When you apologize, notice. Are you feeling guilt, I did a bad thing, or shame, I am a bad person? If you're feeling shame, pause. Say to yourself, I am not my mistake. I am a person who sometimes fails. My worth is inherent. Then proceed with the apology from a place of guilt, not shame. Summary of Chapter 7. An effective apology has 4 R's: recognition, responsibility, remorse, and repair. Avoid common mistakes: the if apology, the but apology, the vague apology, the dramatic apology, the defensive apology, and the empty apology. Guilt is healthy. I did a bad thing. Shame is destructive. I am a bad person. Apologize when you're wrong. Don't apologize when you're not. You can take accountability without collapsing into shame. Your worth is not on the line. Chapter 8. The Integration. Incorporating feedback without losing your sense of self. You've paused. You've filtered. You've reframed. You've apologized when needed. Now comes the hardest part: integrating the feedback into your life. Integration is the skill of actually using criticism to grow. It's the difference between I hear you and I am changing. Many people receive feedback, nod along, and then do absolutely nothing with it. They may have been listening, but they weren't learning. Integration is the bridge between feedback and transformation. The integration framework. I've developed a 3-step process for integrating feedback. Evaluate. Is this feedback worth acting on? Plan. What specific actions will you take? Commit. How will you sustain the change? Step 1. Evaluate. Not all feedback needs to be integrated. Before you commit to change, you need to evaluate whether the feedback is worth acting on. Questions to ask. Is this feedback aligned with my goals and values? Is it based on data or just opinion? Is this something I can realistically change? Is the source credible and trustworthy? Decision point. If the feedback is useful, proceed to step 2. If the feedback is not useful, discard it. You don't need to act on everything. Step 2. Plan. If the feedback is worth acting on, create a specific plan. Questions to ask. What exactly do I need to change? What does success look like? What are the specific actions I will take? What resources or support do I need? What's my timeline? Example, feedback. You need to be more concise in your emails. Plan. I will limit my emails to 3 paragraphs maximum. I will use bullet points for multiple ideas. I will edit each email before sending to cut unnecessary words. Step 3. Commit change is hard. You need to commit to sustaining it. Questions to ask. How will I hold myself accountable? Who can support me in this change? How will I measure my progress? What will I do if I slip up? Example, commitment. I will ask a trusted colleague to review my emails for a month. I will check in with my boss after 30 days to see if they notice improvement. If I slip up, I'll simply start again. The integration in action. The situation. Rachel, a teacher, receives feedback from a student evaluation. You talk too fast. I can't keep up with the lectures. I feel like I'm left behind. Rachel's old self would have defended, this student just isn't paying attention. I'm a great lecturer. Collapsed. I'm a terrible teacher. I should quit. But Rachel has been training. She pauses. She filters. She reframes. Now she's ready to integrate. Step 1. Evaluate. Rachel asks, is this feedback aligned with my goals? Yes. I want my students to learn. Is it based on data? It's one student's experience, but I've heard this before from others. Can I change this? Yes. I can slow down. Is the source credible? Yes. A student's experience matters. Decision. This is useful feedback. I will act on it. Step 2. Plan. Rachel asks, what do I need to change? My pacing. What does success look like? Students say they can follow along and understand the material. What actions will I take? I will record my next lecture and watch it back to see my pacing. I will pause after each key point and ask, any questions? I will use the last 5 minutes of each class for a summary and Q&A. What timeline? I'll start next week and check in with students after a month. Step 3. Commit. Rachel asks, how will I hold myself accountable? I'll ask a colleague to observe a class and give me feedback on pacing. Who can support me? My department head and a trusted colleague. How will I measure progress? I'll do a mid-semester student check-in. What if I slip up? I'll notice, pause, and slow down again. The integration exercise. Part 1. Evaluate a piece of feedback. Think of a piece of feedback you've received recently. Evaluate it. Question answer. Is this feedback aligned with my goals and values? Is it based on data or just opinion? Can I realistically change this? Is the source credible and trustworthy? Decision. Will you act on this feedback? Yes/no. Part 2. Create an integration plan. If you decided to act on the feedback, create a plan. Question answer. What exactly do I need to change? What does success look like? What specific actions will I take? What resources or support do I need? What's my timeline? Part 3. Commit to the change. Question answer. How will I hold myself accountable? Who can support me in this change? How will I measure my progress? What will I do if I slip up? The difference between integration and surrender. A common fear about ego sensitivity is that it requires you to become a doormat, to accept every piece of criticism and change everything about yourself. This is a misunderstanding. Integration is not surrender. Integration is selection. You are choosing which feedback to act on and which to let go. You are integrating feedback into your sense of self, not instead of your sense of self. Integration. I hear you. I will consider this and decide what to change. This feedback is useful. I will incorporate it into my practice. This doesn't align with my values. I'm going to let it go. Surrender. You're right, I'm wrong. I'll change everything. I'll do whatever you want. I have no opinions of my own. The river integrates, the sandcastle surrenders, the fortress resists, the brick wall ignores. Sustaining integration change is not a one-time event. It's a practice. You will slip up. You will revert to old patterns. This is normal. How to sustain. Check in regularly. Weekly check-ins with yourself. How am I doing? What feedback have I received? How have I responded? What have I integrated? Cultivate a support system. Surround yourself with people who give honest, constructive feedback. Ask them to keep you accountable. Celebrate progress. Acknowledge when you've integrated feedback successfully. This reinforces the behavior. Be kind to yourself. When you slip up, don't beat yourself up. Simply notice it, pause, and start again. This is not a failure. It's part of the training. The relationship between integration and identity. One of the deepest fears people have about integrating criticism is that they will lose themselves. If I change everything about myself based on what others say, who will I be? This fear is understandable. It's rooted in the belief that your identity is fixed, a stone statue that must remain unchanged to be authentic. But here's the truth. Your identity is not a statue. It's a river. It flows and changes and adapts to the landscape. It is shaped by the rocks it encounters, criticism, feedback, and challenges. It is fed by tributaries, new experiences, learning, growth. It is never the same river twice, but it is always, recognizably, the same river. When you integrate feedback, you are not erasing yourself. You are allowing your river to flow around an obstacle, to carve a new path, to deepen and widen. You are becoming more yourself, not less, because growth is the essence of life. The paradox of identity. The more you cling to a fixed identity, the more fragile you become. The more you allow your identity to evolve, the more resilient you become. The river archetype understands this paradox. They are deeply rooted in their core values and sense of self-worth. But they are flexible about the details. They know the difference between who they are and how they behave. They change their behavior without feeling their identity is threatened. Integration and the archetypes. Let's see how the different archetypes approach integration. Archetype integration behavior. Outcome fortress rejects all feedback. I don't need to change, they're wrong. Stagnation. Others stop giving feedback. Sandcastle integrates everything. I need to change everything about myself. Burnout, loss of identity, exhaustion. Brick wall ignores all feedback. This doesn't matter. Obsolescence, disconnection from reality. River integrates selectively. I'll consider this and decide what to change. Growth, adaptability, authenticity. The integration mantra. When you're considering integrating feedback, say this to yourself. I am not my behavior. My behavior is a reflection of my choices, not my essence. I can change my behavior without changing my worth. I can accept feedback without accepting shame. I am a river, not a statue. Summary of Chapter 8. Integration is the skill of actually using criticism to grow. The integration framework has 3 steps: evaluate, plan, commit. Not all feedback needs to be integrated. Evaluate carefully. Create specific actionable plans for change. Sustain change through accountability and self-compassion. Integration is not surrender. You choose what to take in and what to let go. Your identity is a river, not a statue. Growth is not a betrayal of who you are. It is an expression of who you are becoming. Chapter 9, the 30-Day Training Protocol. Your daily ego sensitivity workout. You now have the tools, the pause, creating space between stimulus and response. The filter, distinguishing useful feedback from noise. The reframe, reinterpreting criticism as data, not judgment. The apology algorithm, taking accountability without shame. The integration, incorporating feedback without losing yourself. Now it's time to put them into practice. This chapter presents a 30-day training protocol, a structured program to build your ego sensitivity like a muscle. The protocol is designed to be progressive. You start with lighter weights and gradually increase the challenge. Some days you'll practice in low-stakes situations. Other days you'll apply your skills to more difficult feedback. By the end of 30 days, you'll have built new neural pathways and habits that will serve you for a lifetime. How to use this protocol. Daily commitment, 10 to 15 minutes per day. Weekly structure, Week 1, awareness and foundation. Week 2, skill building. Week 3, application week. 4, integration and maintenance materials. A journal or notebook dedicated to your ego sensitivity training. Guidelines. Be honest with yourself. This is your training. Don't judge yourself for failing. Every attempt is a rep. If you miss a day, just start again the next day. Celebrate your progress no matter how small. Week 1. Awareness and Foundation. Theme. Building awareness of your reactivity patterns and practicing the pause. Day 1. The labeling game task. Throughout the day, whenever you receive any form of feedback, positive, negative, or neutral, label it silently. This is information about my behavior, not my existence. Journal. Prompt. What feedback did you receive today? How did it feel to label it? Did you notice a difference in your reaction? Day 2. The vulnerability audit. Task. Complete the vulnerability audit from Chapter 3. Map your hot buttons. Journal. Prompt. What are your top 3 vulnerability domains? What old wounds are associated with each one? How do you feel when these domains are attacked? Day 3. Identify your archetype task. Complete the ego archetype self-assessment from Chapter 2. Journal prompt. What is your dominant archetype? What secondary archetypes do you notice in specific contexts? What is one way you can start shifting toward the river? Day 4. The daily pause. Practice task. Set aside 5 minutes to practice the pause in a low-stakes context. Pause before checking your email. Pause before taking a bite of food. Pause before scrolling social media. Journal prompt. What was it like to practice the pause? Did you notice the urge to react automatically? What physical sensations did you notice? Day 5. The Trigger Journal. Begins task. Start your trigger journal. Throughout the day, whenever you feel defensive, reactive, or collapsed, write down the trigger, the domain, the story, the root, the response. Journal. Prompt. Did you notice any patterns today? What surprised you about your reactions? Day 6. The Maybe Pivot for Fortresses. Task. If you identified as a fortress, practice the maybe pivot. Whenever you receive criticism, say thank you and resist the urge to defend yourself. Alternative task for sandcastles. Practice the data distinction. When you receive criticism, separate facts from stories. Alternative task for brick walls. Practice the what-if experiment. Choose one criticism you've been dismissing and ask, what if I tried it this way? Journal. Prompt. What did you practice today? How did it feel? What was the hardest part? Day 7. reflection and self-compassion. Task: review your journal from the week. Look at your patterns without judgment. Journal. Prompt: what patterns did you notice? What is one insight you gained? What is one thing you want to focus on next week? Week 2. Skill Building Theme: deepening the pause and developing the filter. Day 8. Deepen the pause. Task: practice the 5-second breath when you feel reactive. Inhale for 5, hold for 2, exhale for 7. Do this 5 times. Journal. Prompt: what did it feel like to use the breath? Did it help you pause? What other pause techniques do you want to try? Day 9. Introduce the anchor task. Choose an anchor. For example, touching your thumb to your index finger. Practice it throughout the day in calm moments, so it's ready for reactive moments. Journal prompt: what is your anchor? How did it feel to practice it? When did you use it? Day 10. Practice the filter. Task: when you receive a piece of criticism, run it through the DATA framework. Write it out in your journal. Journal. Prompt: what was the criticism? D. Data or story. A. Accurate or inaccurate. T. True or twisted. U. Useful or useless. What was your filtered response? Day 11. The reframe in action. Task: when you receive criticism, practice reframing. Identity behavior. Always, sometimes, threat information journal. Prompt: what criticism did you receive? What was your distortion? What was your reframe? Day 12. The thank you pivot. Task: practice the thank you pivot in a conversation. When someone criticizes you, say, "Thank you for telling me. I want to give that some thought." Journal. Prompt: what conversation did you practice this in? How did it feel? How did the other person respond? Day 13. The grounding exercise task. If you feel reactive, try the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise. Journal. Prompt: when did you use the grounding exercise? What did it feel like? Did it help you pause and refocus? Day 14. Reflection and self-compassion. Task: review your journal from the week. Reflect on your progress. Journal. Prompt: what skills are getting stronger? What skills are still challenging? What is one thing you want to focus on next week? Week 3. Application Theme: applying your skills to real-world situations. Day 15. Practice the apology algorithm. Task: if you need to apologize for something, use the 4 R's. Recognition, responsibility, remorse, repair. If you don't need to apologize today, practice apologizing to yourself for something. Journal. Prompt: what did you apologize for? How did it go? Did you notice any guilt versus shame? Day 16. Integration planning. Task: choose one piece of feedback you've received. Create an integration plan using the evaluate, plan, commit framework. Journal prompt: what feedback are you integrating? What's your plan? What's your commitment? Day 17. Workplace application. Task: at work, practice receiving feedback with the pause, filter, and reframe. If you receive feedback, take a breath, listen, and use the thank you pivot. Journal. Prompt: what feedback did you receive? How did you respond? What would you do differently next time? Day 18. Relationship application task. In a personal relationship, practice receiving feedback or criticism with openness. Listen without defending. Use the reframe. Journal. Prompt: what conversation did you have? How did you feel? What did you learn? Day 19. Social media application task. If you encounter criticism or negativity on social media, practice the pause. Close the app, walk away, come back later. Journal prompt: what did you encounter? How did you respond? What would you do differently? Day 20. Creative work application task. If you create something, writing art, music, etc., invite honest feedback. Practice receiving it with openness. Journal. Prompt: what feedback did you receive? How did you feel? What did you learn? Day 21. Reflection and self-compassion. Task: review your journal from the week. Reflect on your growth. Journal prompt: what was the most challenging application? What was the most rewarding? What is one thing you want to focus on next week? Week 4. Integration and maintenance theme. Sustaining your practice and preparing for the long term. Day 22. Long-term vision. Task: write a vision for your ego sensitivity practice. Where do you want to be in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years? Journal. Prompt: what is your vision? What changes do you want to see in yourself? How will you know you've succeeded? Day 23. Identify supporters. Task: identify 2 to 3 people you can trust to give you honest, constructive feedback. Ask them for feedback and practice receiving it. Journal. Prompt: who did you identify? What feedback did you receive? How did you respond? Day 24. Accountability systems. Task: create an accountability system. This could be a weekly check-in with a friend, a journaling practice, or a support group. Journal. Prompt: what accountability system did you create? How will it help you sustain your practice? Day 25. Gratitude for growth. Task: write a letter of gratitude to someone who has given you difficult but valuable feedback. You don't have to send it, just write it. Journal. Prompt: who did you write to? What feedback were you grateful for? How did it help you grow? Day 26. Self-compassion. Practice. Task: practice the self-compassion. Break. Place your hand on your heart and say, this is hard. I feel ashamed/afraid/small, but I am not my mistake. I am a human being who sometimes fails. I deserve compassion, not condemnation. Journal prompt: how did this practice feel? When did you need self-compassion? What did you learn? Day 27. Review your trigger journal. Task: review your trigger journal from the past month. Look for patterns. Journal. Prompt: what patterns do you see? What are your most common triggers? How have you grown in responding to them? Day 28. The ongoing practice. Task: create a plan for maintaining your ego sensitivity practice beyond the 30 days. What will you continue doing daily? Weekly? Monthly? Journal. Prompt: what's your maintenance plan? What will you do daily? What will you do weekly? Day 29. Celebrate progress. Task: write down all the ways you've grown over the past month. Be specific. Journal. Prompt: how have you grown? What are you proud of? What's the biggest change you've noticed? Day 30. The River's Commitment Task. Write a commitment statement for your ego sensitivity practice. This is your personal covenant, what you promise to yourself about how you'll receive feedback and grow. Journal prompt: what is your commitment statement? How will you honor it? Sample commitment statement. Here's an example of what your commitment statement might look like. I commit to my ego sensitivity practice. I will pause before reacting, filter before accepting, reframe before internalizing, apologize with integrity, and integrate with intention. I know that I am not my mistakes. I am a person who sometimes fails, and that is okay. I am growing, and growth is a lifelong journey. I will be kind to myself along the way. Summary of Chapter 9. The 30-day training protocol builds your ego sensitivity through daily practice. Week 1 focuses on awareness and foundation. Week 2 focuses on skill building. Week 3 focuses on application. Week 4 focuses on integration and maintenance. The protocol is progressive and flexible. Adjust as needed. The ultimate goal is to sustain your practice beyond the 30 days. Part 3, the application. Bringing ego sensitivity to life. You now have the tools and the training. The final part of this book applies ego sensitivity to the most challenging arenas of modern life: the workplace, intimate relationships, social media, creative work, and leadership. Chapter 10, at work. Navigating performance reviews, difficult bosses, and peer feedback. The workplace is often the most intense arena for ego challenges. Our careers are tied to our identities. Our paychecks are tied to our performance. Our status is tied to our reputation. Criticism at work doesn't just feel like a threat to our ego. It can feel like a threat to our survival. This chapter provides specific strategies for applying ego sensitivity in professional contexts. Performance reviews. Performance reviews are a particular kind of torture for the untrained ego. They are structured criticism delivered annually, often with consequences attached. The stakes feel high, and the feedback feels permanent. The Sandcastle's trap. Reads the review and collapses into shame. I'm a terrible employee. I'm going to get fired. Accepts all criticism without question. Leaves the meeting feeling devastated and worthless. The fortress's trap. Reads the review and prepares a rebuttal. Argues with the reviewer. Explains away the criticism. This review is unfair. They don't understand my work. Leaves the meeting feeling angry and resentful. The river's approach. Pauses before reacting. Reads the review. Takes notes. Breathes. Filters. Separates data from story. Reframes. This is about my behavior, not my identity. Evaluates. What's useful? What's not? Plans. What will I change? What will I keep? Integrates. Commits to specific actions. Performance review. Preparation before the review. Reflect on your own strengths and weaknesses. Gather evidence of your achievements. Prepare questions for your reviewer. During the review, listen without interrupting. Take notes on specific feedback. Ask clarifying questions. Can you give me an example? Use the thank you pivot. Thank you for this feedback. I want to give it some thought. Don't defend or collapse. After the review, process the feedback with a filter and reframe. Create an integration plan. Set up a follow-up meeting to discuss your plan. Difficult bosses. Some bosses are just difficult. They may be critical, dismissive, micromanaging, or emotionally volatile. Working for them is a constant challenge to your ego. The Sandcastle's trap. Takes every criticism personally. Feels constantly inadequate. Works harder to please but never feels enough. The fortress's trap. Resists all feedback. Sees the boss as an enemy. Builds resentment and silent rebellion. The river's approach. Recognizes that the boss is a person with their own insecurities. Sees feedback as information, not judgment. Maintains boundaries. I can take in what's useful and let go of what's not. Communicates clearly and professionally. Practices self-compassion. I'm doing my best. I can't control my boss. Strategies for dealing with difficult bosses. Depersonalize the feedback. This is about my work, not about me. My boss is stressed. This isn't personal. I can learn from this without internalizing it. Ask for specifics. What exactly would you like me to do differently? Can you give me a specific example? What would success look like? Set boundaries. I appreciate your feedback. I'll take it into consideration. I'd like to discuss this at a later time. Can we schedule a meeting? I hear you. Let me think about how to address this. Find support. Talk to trusted colleagues. Seek mentorship or coaching. Maintain perspective. This job is not my entire identity. Peer feedback. Peer feedback can be particularly challenging because it feels like competition. How dare they criticize me? They're not my boss. They're not better than me. The Sandcastle's trap. Feels humiliated by peer criticism. Internalizes the feedback as proof of inadequacy. Seeks reassurance from others. The fortress's trap. Dismisses peer criticism. They don't know what they're talking about. Sees peers as rivals. Defends and deflects. The river's approach. Sees peers as collaborators, not competitors. Recognizes that peer feedback can be valuable. Practices openness. Thank you for sharing this. I want to consider it. Summary of Chapter 10. The workplace is a high-stakes arena for ego challenges. Performance reviews can be navigated with preparation, presence, and post-processing. Difficult bosses require depersonalization, specificity, boundaries, and support. Peer feedback is an opportunity for collaboration and growth. The ego sensitivity skills, pause, filter, reframe, apology, integration, apply directly to professional contexts. Chapter 11 in Relationships. Hearing your partner's complaints as bids for connection. Intimate relationships are the arena where criticism cuts deepest. Our partners know us intimately. They know our vulnerabilities. The criticism can feel like a betrayal. The one person who should understand me is attacking me. But here's a reframe. Complaints in relationships are often bids for connection. Your partner is not attacking you. They are reaching for you. They are saying, I need something. I'm not getting it. Please see me. The sandcastle collapses. I'm a terrible partner. I'm failing. The fortress defends. You're the one who's wrong. You're impossible. The river listens. I hear you're frustrated. Tell me more. What do you need from me? The complaint to connection framework. When your partner criticizes you, try this. Step 1. Pause. Take a breath. Recognize the reactive surge. Don't act on it. Step 2. Listen. Truly listen. Don't interrupt. Don't prepare your defense. Just hear them. Step 3. Validate before you respond to the content of the complaint. Validate your partner's experience. I hear you're feeling frustrated. I can see why you'd be upset. It makes sense you'd feel that way. Step 4. Explore. Ask clarifying questions. What's the main thing that's bothering you? What do you need from me? Can you give me an example? Step 5. Respond from a place of clarity. Respond appropriately. This may include an apology if you're wrong, a plan to change if change is needed, a healthy boundary if the criticism is unfair, a request for more information if you need it. Common relationship challenges and ego sensitivity. Challenge, sandcastle response, fortress response. River response partner says, you never listen to me. You're right, I'm terrible. I'm so sorry. That's not true. I listen all the time. You're the one who never talks. I hear you're feeling unheard. Can you tell me more about what you need? Partner says, you're always so distracted. I know, I'm awful. I should be more present. I'm distracted because you're always nagging me. You're right, I've been distracted lately. I'm sorry. What do you need from me? Partner says, you don't care about my feelings. I do care. I'm just terrible at showing it. I'm sorry I'm so broken. I care more than you know. You're just impossible to please. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I do care about your feelings. What can I do to show you better? The repair attempt. In relationships, the goal is not to be right. The goal is to repair. When criticism comes, your job is to move toward connection, not away from it. The repair attempt. I'm sorry, I messed up. I see you're hurt. I want to understand. How can we fix this? I love you. I hate that I hurt you. Summary of Chapter 11. Criticism in relationships is often a bid for connection. The complaint-to-connection framework helps you hear the underlying need. Repairing is more important than being right. The pause is crucial for staying present in relationship conflict. Intimacy requires vulnerability, the willingness to be wrong without collapsing. Chapter 12 on social media. Navigating trolls, negative reviews, and public failure, social media is the crucible of the modern ego. It is a platform for constant comparison, public judgment, and infinite feedback. A single negative comment can trigger the fight-or-flight response. A mass of negative feedback can feel like a public execution. The sandcastle falls apart, the fortress fights back. The river navigates with grace. Social media and the ego. Social media amplifies ego challenges because public nature, criticism is visible to others, permanence, negative feedback stays online, anonymity, trolls can attack without accountability. Scale, a small negative response can feel huge in context. The solution: ego sensitivity. Strategies for social media. 1. The pause before posting. Before you post anything, pause. Ask yourself, why am I posting this? Am I seeking validation or sharing value? What would happen if this got negative feedback? 2. The pause before responding. When you receive a negative comment, pause. Don't respond immediately. Close the app. Walk away. Come back later. 3. The filter for trolls. Trolls are not giving useful feedback. They are projecting, attacking, or seeking attention. Run their comments through the filter. Is this data or story? Usually story. Is this accurate or inaccurate? Often inaccurate. Is this true or twisted? Often twisted. Is this useful or useless? Almost always useless. 4. The reframe for negative reviews. If you receive a negative review of your work, reframe it. This person is talking about my work, not my worth. What can I learn from this? Is there any truth here, or is it just a mismatch? 5. The integration for constructive feedback. If the feedback is useful, even if it's painful, integrate it. Evaluate, is this worth acting on? Plan, what will I change? Commit, how will I sustain the change? 6. Boundaries. You don't need to engage with everyone. You can block or mute toxic accounts. Take breaks from social media. Limit your time on platforms that trigger reactivity. Remember, you don't owe anyone access to your psyche. The social media reframe. This is a screen. These are pixels. The person on the other side doesn't know me. Their opinion doesn't define me. I am safe. I can take what's useful and let go of what's not. Summary of Chapter 12. Social media amplifies ego challenges through public nature, permanence, and anonymity. Pause before posting and before responding. Filter out trolls and useless feedback. Reframe negative reviews as commentary on work, not identity. Integrate useful feedback. Set boundaries, block, mute, limit time. Remember that your worth is not determined by pixels on a screen. Chapter 13. In creative work. Using rejection as fuel creative work is uniquely vulnerable. You are putting a piece of yourself into the world. When it's rejected or criticized, it feels like you are being rejected. But creative rejection is not personal. It's data, it's feedback, it's a signpost pointing toward refinement. The creative's challenge. The sandcastle's trap. I'm a terrible artist, I should give up. Abandons projects after rejection, sees rejection as proof of worthlessness. The fortress's trap. They just don't understand my genius. Dismisses all criticism, refuses to evolve. The river's approach. This feedback is about my work, not my worth. What can I learn from this? Rejection is part of the process. I will keep creating. Strategies for creative criticism. 1. Depersonalize the rejection. Your work is not you. It's an expression of you. When someone rejects your work, they are rejecting a specific piece of expression, not your essence. Reframe. They didn't like this piece. They might like the next one, or they might not. And that's okay. 2. Harvest the data. Even if a rejection is painful, there is often data in it. What can you learn? Was it a mismatch in audience? Was it a mismatch in execution? Was it a timing issue? Was it a skill issue? 3. Keep creating. The only way to survive creative criticism is to keep creating. The more you create, the less each individual piece matters. You become less attached to any single outcome. 4. Find your tribe. Some people will get your work, some won't. Find the people who get it. Let go of the people who don't. Summary of Chapter 13. Creative criticism is not personal. It's about the work, not the creator. Rejection is data, not judgment. Depersonalize, harvest the data, keep creating, and find your tribe. Chapter 14. In Leadership. Creating a culture where criticism is safe. Leadership is not just about receiving criticism, it's about creating a culture where criticism is safe, valued, and integrated. The best leaders model ego sensitivity. They show that it's okay to be wrong. They show that feedback is welcome. They create psychological safety. The leader's challenge. The fortress leader. Dismisses feedback, punishes critics, creates a culture of fear, stagnates. The sandcastle leader collapses under feedback, inconsistently leads, creates chaos and confusion. The river leader welcomes feedback, models vulnerability, creates psychological safety, fosters growth and innovation. Strategies for Leadership 1. Ask for feedback actively. Ask for feedback from your team. Don't wait for it to come to you. 2. Receive it graciously when you receive feedback. Model the river response. Pause. Listen. Thank them. Integrate. 3. Apologize publicly when you make a mistake. Apologize openly. Show your team that it's okay to be wrong. 4. Create psychological safety. No one will be punished for speaking up. Mistakes are learning opportunities. Your feedback matters. 5. Lead with vulnerability. Show your team that you are human. Share your own struggles with criticism. Model what you want them to become. Summary of Chapter 14. Leadership requires ego sensitivity. The best leaders model vulnerability and openness. Ask for feedback, receive it graciously, apologize when needed. Create psychological safety for your team. Lead with vulnerability and courage. Part 4. The Integration. Sustaining your ego sensitivity for a lifetime. You have the tools, you have the training. Now the question is, how do you keep it going? Ego sensitivity is not a destination. It's a practice. It's a lifelong commitment to growth, openness, and self-compassion. Chapter 15, The Ongoing Practice. Maintaining your skills. The skills you've learned in this book are like muscles. If you don't use them, they weaken. If you practice them, they strengthen. Daily practice. The pause in low-stakes moments. The labeling game for all feedback. The trigger journal for reactivity. Weekly practice. Review your trigger journal. Identify patterns and growth areas. Practice one specific skill in a challenging context. Monthly practice. Ask for feedback from trusted sources. Reflect on your integration progress. Set new intentions for growth. The ego sensitivity check-in. Ask yourself these questions regularly. How have I received criticism this week? Where did I react defensively? Where did I respond with openness? What feedback have I integrated? What feedback should I let go of? How am I treating myself when I fail? The lifelong journey. Ego sensitivity is not a destination. You will never arrive. You will always have moments of defensiveness, collapse, or resistance. This is part of being human. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. The goal is the ability to notice when you're reacting and choose a different response. The goal is to keep growing, keep learning, and keep being kind to yourself along the way. Chapter 16. Teaching Ego Sensitivity to Others. Passing it on. You've learned ego sensitivity. Now you can teach it to others, your children, your employees, your friends. Teaching children. Children are learning their ego sensitivity patterns. You can help them develop healthy responses to criticism instead of, "You are so lazy." Identity door. Say you didn't do your homework. What happened? Behavior door. Instead of, "Don't be upset about the feedback." Dismissing their feelings. Say, "I see you're upset. That's okay. Let's talk about what you can learn from this." Validating and teaching. Instead of, "They're just jealous." Dismissing the feedback. Say, "Is there any truth to what they said? What can you learn from it?" Teaching the filter. Teaching employees. As a leader, you can teach your team ego sensitivity. Model it. Receive feedback with openness. Apologize when you're wrong. Ask for feedback regularly. Create systems. Regular feedback loops. Psychological safety. Growth mindset culture. Teach the skills, the pause, the filter, the reframe, the apology, the integration. Summary of Chapter 16. Ego sensitivity can be taught to others. Teaching children requires moving from identity to behavior. Teaching employees requires modeling, systems, and skill building. Passing on ego sensitivity creates a more resilient, compassionate world. Conclusion. The unshakable self. We began this journey with two stories, Margaret, the executive who collapsed under criticism, and David, the artist who grew through it. Margaret and David are not exceptional. They are archetypes, representations of the two paths available to all of us. We can build our ego as a castle, brittle and defensive, or we can train our ego as a muscle, flexible and resilient. Ego sensitivity training is not about becoming immune to criticism. It's about becoming available to it without being destroyed by it. It's about learning to hear hard truths without collapsing into shame. It's about taking accountability without losing your sense of self. The promise of ego sensitivity. By practicing the skills in this book, you will become someone who notices the defensive response rising in your body, but does not act on it impulsively. Assesses criticism objectively. Is this true? Is this useful? Is this meant to help or harm? Decides what to do with it. Take it in, discard it, or hold it for later reflection. Responds from a place of clarity rather than reaction. You will become someone who can apologize without feeling worthless, can stand your ground without being arrogant, can be wrong without falling apart, can grow without losing yourself. This is the unshakable self, not a self that is rigid and immovable, but a self that is deeply rooted, like a great redwood in a storm. The redwood bends, it sways, it drops a few branches, but it does not uproot. The final reframe, the greatest reframe of all, is this: I am not my mistakes. I am a person who sometimes fails. My worth is inherent, not earned. I can grow without shame. I can change without losing myself. I am a river, not a statue. The invitation, ego. Sensitivity is a practice, not a destination. You will have moments when you react defensively. You will have moments when you collapse into shame. This is part of the journey. When you fall, notice it, pause, and begin again. You are not failing, you are training, and you are growing stronger with every rep. So go out into the world, receive feedback with openness, stand in your worth, grow from your mistakes, and be kind to yourself along the way. This is your invitation. The gym is open. The weights are waiting. Your ego is ready to be trained. Let the training begin. Appendices. Appendix A, quick reference cards. The 4 ego archetypes, archetype motto core. Fear, defensive strategy, training prescription. Fortress, I am right, you are wrong. Mediocrity, exposure, attack, deflect, rationalize, the maybe pivot. Sandcastle, I knew I was a fraud. Inadequacy, unworthiness. Collapse, internalize, the data distinction. Brick wall, I am who I am, take it or leave it. Change, uncertainty, dismiss, ignore the oh what if experiment. River, I have a strong core, but I flow. Stagnation, pause, assess, adapt. Maintenance. The 5 domains of vulnerability. Domain core question: how criticism hits competence. Am I good enough at what I do? You made a mistake. Morality. Am I a good person? You were selfish. Likability. Do people like me? You're annoying. Control. Am I safe and in control? You're a mess. Appearance. Am I attractive/acceptable? You look tired. The 5 essential skills. Skill. Question action. The pause. Can I create space before responding? 5-second breath. Anchor. Thank you. Pivot. The filter. Is this data or story? Accurate or inaccurate? True or twisted? Useful or useless? DAT, a framework. The reframe. How can I reinterpret this as data, not judgment? Identity behavior, always, sometimes. Threat information. Perfection learning. The apology. How do I take accountability without shame? 4 R's. Recognition, responsibility, remorse, repair, the integration. How do I use this feedback to grow? Evaluate, plan, commit. The DATA filter, step question action. D data or story. Ask for specific examples. Are accurate or inaccurate? Check the facts. Correct misunderstandings. T, true or twisted. Acknowledge the grain of truth. Gently correct the distortion. U, useful or useless. Take what's useful. Discard what's not. The 4 R's of apology are: what it is, what it's not, recognition. Acknowledge the harm or mistake, vague or if statements. Responsibility. Own your role without excuses, blaming others or making excuses. Remorse, express genuine regret. Performative emotion or self-flagellation. Repair, commit to making it right. Empty promises or vague statements. Common distortions and reframes. Distortion, reframe. I am a terrible communicator. I communicated poorly in this instance. I always mess everything up. I made a mistake in this situation. They're completely right about me. They have a perspective. There may be truth to it. This is the end of my career. This is one piece of feedback. It's an opportunity. I should have been perfect. Perfection is impossible. This is a chance to improve. I am my mistakes. I am a person who sometimes fails. I am bad. I did a bad thing. Ego sensitivity mantras. This is information about my behavior, not my existence. I am not my mistakes. I am a person who sometimes fails. My worth is inherent, not earned. I can change without losing myself. I am a river, not a statue. This is not a threat. This is information. I am safe. I am not in danger. I can take what's useful and let go of what's not. I am a good person who made a mistake. Growth is not a betrayal of who I am. It is an expression of who I am becoming. The pause technique. How to do it, when to use it. 5-second breath. Inhale, 5, hold 2, exhale 7. Anytime you feel reactive, the anchor. Touch, thumb to finger. Press feet into floor, practice in calm moments. Use in reactive moments. The labeling interrupt. Say, I am having a defensive reaction. When you notice reactivity rising, the grounding exercise. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. See, touch, hear, smell, taste. When you're highly triggered, the thank you pivot. Say, thank you for telling me. Let me think about it. When someone criticizes you, the integration plan template step. Question your answer. Evaluate. Is this feedback worth acting on? Is it aligned with my goals and values? Is it based on data or just opinion? Can I realistically change this? Is the source credible and trustworthy? Plan. What exactly do I need to change? What does success look like? What specific actions will I take? What resources or support do I need? What's my timeline? Commit. How will I hold myself accountable? Who can support me in this change? How will I measure my progress? What will I do if I slip up? Appendix B, the Ego Sensitivity Workbook. Weekly Ego Sensitivity Check-in. Week offs. 1. Feedback received this week. Feedback. My response, what I learned. 2. Defensive moments trigger. Domain, my reaction, how I wish I'd responded. 3. Skills practiced. Checkmark, pause. Checkmark, filter. Checkmark, reframe, checkmark. Apology, checkmark, integration. 4. Insights, what did I learn about myself this week? 5. Intentions for next week. What skill will I focus on? What situation will I practice in? 6. Self-compassion. Check-in, how am I treating myself when I fail? What do I need this week? Monthly Ego Sensitivity Review. Month. 1. Progress. What feedback have I successfully integrated? What skills are getting stronger? What patterns am I noticing? 2. Challenges. What situations triggered me this month? What skills are still difficult? What barriers are getting in the way? 3. Growth. How have I grown this month? What am I proud of? What's the biggest change I've noticed? 4. Vision, where do I want to be in 6 months? What is my vision for my ego sensitivity practice? What do I need to get there? 5. Commitment. What am I committing to for the next month? Trigger journal template date. 1. The trigger. What was said or done? 2. The domain. Which of the 5 domains was hit? Competence morality. Likability control. Appearance 3. The story. What did you tell yourself about it? 4. The root. What old wound was activated? 5. The response. How did you respond? How do you wish you had responded? 6. The reframe. What reframe would have helped in the moment? 7. The learning. What did you learn from this experience? Apology practice. Template date. Situation. What happened? Recognition. I want to apologize for. Responsibility. I take full responsibility for. Remorse. I know this affected you because I'm genuinely sorry for. Repair. Here's what I'll do to make it right. Self-compassion. I am a good person who made a mistake. My worth is not on the line. Integration plan template. Date. Feedback. I'm integrating. Step 1. Evaluate question answer. Is this feedback aligned with my goals and values? Is it based on data or just opinion? Can I realistically change this? Is the source credible and trustworthy? Decision. Will I act on this? Yes, no. Step 2. Plan question answer. What exactly do I need to change? What does success look like? What specific actions will I take? What resources or support do I need? What's my timeline? Step 3. Commit question answer. How will I hold myself accountable? Who can support me in this change? How will I measure my progress? What will I do if I slip up? Author's note. This book was born from my own journey with criticism. For years I was a fortress, defensive, arrogant, and terrified of being exposed as a fraud. I built walls so high that nothing could penetrate them. But nothing could penetrate them, including the feedback I desperately needed to grow. Then I collapsed. A devastating piece of criticism broke through my defenses, and I crumbled like a sandcastle. I spent months in the rubble, unsure of who I was or what I was worth. Eventually, I realized that neither the fortress nor the sandcastle was sustainable. I needed a third way. I needed to train my ego to be responsive rather than reactive. I needed to become a river. This book is the distillation of that training and everything I've learned from working with clients, studying psychology, and continuing my own practice. It is the book I wish I had when I was still building my walls. If you're reading this, I want you to know you are not alone. We are all struggling with the same paradox. How to have enough self-esteem to survive, but not so much that we can't grow. The answer is not to kill the ego or to worship it. The answer is to train it. May your training be fruitful. May you learn to receive criticism without collapse. May you grow without losing yourself. And may you always remember you are a river, not a statue. With gratitude, Tomas Hatvani Checo. Acknowledgements. This book would not exist without the countless people who have given me feedback, both painful and helpful, over the years. To every boss, colleague, friend, and partner who had the courage to tell me the truth, thank you. I am a better person because of you. To my editor, who challenged me to make this book clearer, deeper, and more useful, thank you for your patience and insight. To my family who have seen me at my most defensive and my most vulnerable, thank you for your love and acceptance. And to you, the reader, thank you for your courage. This is not an easy journey, but it is a worthy one. End of ego sensitivity training. If you've made it this far, you've already taken the first step. Now take the next one. Go out there, receive some feedback, and grow. The world needs more rivers. The end.